The neon heartbeat of Tokyo pulsed through the rain-slicked streets of Shibuya like electricity through a living circuit board. Thousands of souls moved beneath the glow of countless screens, each one oblivious to the predator moving through their midst. Han Seoul-Oh downshifted as the orange Mazda RX-7 carved through the intersection, the rotary engine's distinctive scream cutting through the ambient noise of the city. The Valeside fortune kit gleamed under the strobing lights, sunset pearl orange bleeding into deep black accents, a masterpiece of automotive art that had become his signature in Tokyo's underground. The Teriyaki boys thumped through the custom sound system, but Han's mind was elsewhere. Over a year of building an empire in this neon jungle. Over a year since Giselle's death on that Spanish runway had hollowed him out, left him searching for purpose in the only place that made sense anymore, the drift. His phone buzzed. Sean's voice crackled through the Bluetooth, young and urgent. Han, DK's crew is right behind you. They know about the money. Han's expression remained perfectly calm, almost bored. He'd anticipated this. Takashi, the so-called Drift King, was predictable in his desperation. The Yakuza connections, the inevitable confrontation over the skimmed funds. It was all theater, and Han had already written the final act. "Let them come," Han said quietly, his voice carrying that characteristic economy of words that made every syllable count. "They won't catch me." Something that didn't belong. The dashboard scanner, a custom frequency detector he'd installed after the Rio heist, as insurance against exactly this kind of situation, suddenly came alive. Green lines spiked across the small display, pulsing in patterns that made Han's blood run cold. That wasn't Tokyo Metro Police frequency. That wasn't even Japanese law enforcement encryption. His eyes narrowed as recognition flickered through his consciousness. Military-grade signal encryption, sophisticated routing protocols he'd seen once before, buried in technical files from Owen Shaw's operation that Brian had shared with the crew. "Sean," Han said, his voice dropping an octave. "Change of plans. Get off the grid. Now." "What?" "Han, what's?" "Do it. Radio silence until I contact you." He ended the call, his mind already racing through scenarios. Someone with serious resources was here, in Tokyo, tracking him. This wasn't about DK's money. This was something else entirely. Han's rearview mirror reflected the chaos behind him, street racers weaving through traffic, the distant flash of DK's crew giving chase. But cutting through it all, moving with surgical precision, was a vehicle that didn't belong in this street race. A black Mercedes S-Class, 1992 model. Pristine condition, moving through traffic not with the frantic energy of the street racers, but with the calculated efficiency of a trained operator. Hunting. Han's hand moved to the hidden switch on the steering column. The scanner began recording the frequency signature, storing the encrypted data for later analysis. Whatever happened in the next 60 seconds, he would have intel. That was the difference between surviving and dying. Preparation for every outcome. The intersection ahead loomed massive. Shibuya Crossing, the beating heart of Tokyo's organized chaos. Hundreds of pedestrians waited at the edges, umbrellas reflecting the neon like a field of multicolored mushrooms. The light was about to change. Han calculated distances, angles, timing. The Mercedes was accelerating. The approach vector was perfect for a T-bone collision at the driver's side door. Professional. Lethal. Designed to look like an accident in the chaos of an illegal street race. 1 second to decide. Live or die. Han downshifted hard, the rotary engine screaming in protest. His right hand yanked the handbrake while his left wrenched the steering wheel to its limit. Physics and skill merged into something close to art. The RX-7 rotated 360 degrees in the space of a heartbeat. Time seemed to dilate, each millisecond stretching into infinity. Through the passenger window, now facing backward mid-rotation, Han locked eyes with the driver of the Mercedes. The man's face was stone, cold, professional. European features set in an expression of calculated surprise as his target suddenly wasn't where it was supposed to be. Deckard Shaw. Han didn't know the name yet, but he would never forget that face. The Mercedes overshot by inches, missing the killing blow by a margin so thin it could be measured in heartbeats. Han completed the rotation, straightened the wheel, and hammered the throttle. The RX-7 disappeared into a side alley like a ghost dissolving into shadow. Behind him, the Mercedes braked hard, but Tokyo's arterial maze had already swallowed its prey. 10 minutes later, Han stood on a rooftop 3 blocks from the intersection. Rain misted against his face as he watched the scene unfold below through a pair of compact binoculars. The Mercedes was parked at the edge of the chaos. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. And the man, Shaw, moved with the confidence of someone who owned the moment. He opened the trunk, retrieved something, a Nissan Skyline GT-RR 34. Not Han's car, but similar enough. Someone had prepared this in advance, had it transported here, was now positioning it precisely where the RX-7 should have crashed. Professional didn't begin to describe this level of intelligence gathering. Han's jaw tightened as he watched Shaw plant the car, connect something to the fuel line. Then Shaw reached into his pocket and pulled out an object that made Han's heart stop. A cross necklace. Similar to Dom's style, but not Dom's actual cross. Han had seen Dom wearing his just days ago, during their last video call. This was a replica, planted evidence designed to send a psychological message. Shaw placed it carefully beside the skyline, then stepped back and triggered something on a remote detonator. The R-34 exploded into flames, the fireball mushrooming into the rainy Tokyo night. It was perfect. It looked exactly like what would happen if a street racer lost control and crashed at high speed. Han pulled out his phone, zooming the camera to maximum, recording everything. Shaw's face, the setup, the planted evidence. Then Shaw made a phone call. Even from this distance, Han could read his lips. "You don't know me. You're about to." Police vehicles flooded the intersection. Shaw melted into the crowd with the practiced ease of a ghost, and Tokyo's finest began documenting what they believed was the death of Han Seoul-Oh. The safe house was sparse, a single-room apartment in a building that didn't officially exist on any city records. Han had prepared it months ago, one of 7 such locations scattered across Tokyo, places to disappear, places to think. He sat at the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as the scanner data uploaded to his decryption software. The encryption was sophisticated, but not impossible. It took 17 minutes to break down the signal routing. 3 proxy servers, one in Singapore, one in Berlin, one in Cairo, all leading back to a source that made Han's blood run cold. Recent deployment history matching Owen Shaw's timeline in Spain, where Giselle had died, where Owen Shaw had built his device before Dom's crew stopped him. The pieces began clicking together in Han's mind like the tumblers of a lock falling into place. This wasn't random. This was connected to something bigger, someone with access to operational intelligence, someone who knew about the Rio heist, about his connection to Dom's crew, about his movements in Tokyo. Someone who knew which car he would be driving, at exactly which intersection, at exactly which time. Han opened his secure drive, the encrypted files he'd kept from the Rio heist, Dom's emergency contact protocols, Brian's FBI intelligence network backdoors, technical specifications from Tej, financial data from the $100 million score, and buried in the metadata of a communication file, he found it. A single reference to an operator designation, Cipher, mentioned once in a fragment of an intercepted communication from Owen Shaw's network. A name, a shadow behind the shadows. Something Brian had flagged but never fully investigated because they'd assumed Owen Shaw was the top of the chain. Han pulled up the Tokyo traffic camera network, a system he'd been quietly backdooring for months as part of his own intelligence gathering. The intersection where he died was covered by 17 different cameras. He watched himself drift away from death, watched Shaw set up the scene, watched the explosion and the aftermath. Then he began erasing. One by one, the files deleted. The footage of his survival disappeared like it had never existed. Han covered his tracks with the precision of a surgeon, leaving only the official narrative. Han Seoul-Oh died in a street racing accident in Shibuya. His phone sat on the desk beside him. Dom's number glowed on the screen. His thumb hovered over the call button. Family meant everything to Dom. Brotherhood was the foundation of everything they'd built together. Calling him was instinct, was loyalty, was the right thing to do. But calling him was also leading whoever orchestrated this attack straight to Los Angeles, straight to Mia, to Brian, to the crew that had become his family after Giselle's death. If they could find him in Tokyo, if they could predict his movements with such precision, They could find Dom, could hurt the people Han cared about. The decision crystallized in his mind with painful clarity. He had to stay dead, not just to Tokyo, to everyone. "If they can find me here," Han whispered to the empty room, "they can find you in LA. Time to disappear." He couldn't risk even encrypted communication. Not yet. Not until he understood what he was facing. Han pulled out a notepad, analog, untraceable, and began writing down everything he knew. Dom's contact information, committed to memory, emergency protocols, memorized and then destroyed. The physical evidence burned, but the knowledge preserved in the one place no one could hack. His mind, the last connection to his old life, turned to ash in the kitchenette sink. Han Seoul-Oh was dead, but the Ghost King was just being born. The rain intensified outside, Tokyo's neon bleeding together into an impressionistic painting of light and shadow. Han sat in darkness thinking, planning, calculating his next move. He'd built an empire here. Garages, racing connections, business fronts. All of it legitimate on the surface, all of it useful for something deeper. He had $11 million from the Rio heist, minus the money he'd been skimming from what he now suspected were connected to whoever sent Shaw. That money would become infrastructure, technology, a network. If this Cipher wanted him dead, there was a reason. If Deckard Shaw was her weapon, there were more weapons in her arsenal. If she could orchestrate his assassination with such precision, she was planning something bigger, and Han was going to find out what. But not as Han Seoul-Oh, street racer and drifter, as something new, something evolved. He pulled up a fresh document on the laptop and began typing. Plans within plans, contingencies, strategies, ghost network, foundation protocols. The street racing underground wasn't just about cars and adrenaline. It was an intelligence network waiting to be weaponized. Thousands of racers across Asia, all moving through cities like blood cells through a body, seeing everything, reporting nothing. Until now. Han began building the architecture of his resurrection, not as a man, but as a system. A ghost in the machine of Tokyo's underground, watching, listening, learning. Somewhere in the city, Deckard Shaw was reporting back to Cipher that the target was eliminated. Somewhere they were celebrating their victory. They had no idea they just created their worst nightmare. Han allowed himself the ghost of a smile. It was cold, calculated, and utterly without mercy. "Welcome to Tokyo," he whispered. "My city, my rules, my game." The computer screen reflected in his eyes, lines of code streaming past like rain on a windshield. The Ghost King had work to do. 6 months later, the abandoned warehouse district existed in that forgotten space between Tokyo's gleaming downtown and its industrial wasteland. No tourists ventured here. No police patrols bothered with buildings that had been condemned for years. It was perfect. Inside what appeared to be just another rusting metal shell, Han had built something extraordinary. The garage floor gleamed with professional-grade epoxy coating. LED strip lighting ran along every surface, casting everything in a cool blue glow that felt like stepping into a high-tech bunker. The orange RX-7 sat on a hydraulic lift, its body partially disassembled as new modifications were installed. But the car was just the centerpiece. The real operation spread across the warehouse like a spider's web. 3 walls covered in monitors displayed a dizzying array of information. Tokyo street cameras, traffic patterns, radio frequency spectrum analyzers, encrypted communications intercepts, maps of Asia studded with red pins marking locations that meant something only to Han. Sean Boswell pushed through the reinforced security door, carrying a weatherproof case. The young American had grown harder in the past 6 months. Less cocky drift racer, more tactical operator. Han had made sure of that. "Toshi confirmed," Sean said, setting the case on a workbench. 3 black Mercedes, German plates, parked outside the Azabu district. "Your frequency detector picked up the same encryption signature from Shibuya." Han didn't look up from the RX-7's undercarriage, where he was installing a secondary EMP shielding system. His voice carried that same economical precision it always had. "Shaw's still here, still looking for confirmation I'm dead." Sean leaned against the workbench, watching his mentor work with the fluid grace of someone who understood machines on an almost spiritual level. "What if he finds out you're not? Then we'll know we're close to something worth hiding." Han emerged from beneath the car, wiping his hands on a rag. His face had changed in subtle ways over the past 6 months. Harder, more focused. The grief that had haunted him since Giselle's death had transformed into something colder. Purpose carved from loss. He walked to the communication station, a setup that would make most intelligence agencies jealous. Tej would have appreciated the elegance of it. Brian would have understood the tactical applications. Dom would have simply nodded in approval at family taking care of family. But none of them knew Han was alive. And that knowledge sat in Han's chest like a stone every single day. "Show me Toshi's report," Han said. Sean opened the case. Inside were USB drives, South Dakota cards, and printed photographs, the currency of intelligence in an age where digital footprints could be tracked. Han's network operated on the principle that the most secure information was physical information. The photographs showed the Mercedes from multiple angles, timestamps, license plates, most importantly, heat signature analysis from a custom thermal camera that Sean had acquired through Twinkie's electronics network. "Same thermal profile as the vehicle from Shibuya," Sean said, pointing to the distinctive heat distribution from the engine. "Modified cooling system, military grade. Shaw's using the same car. Or confident no one's looking. You think he knows you're investigating him?" Han studied the photographs with the intensity of a chess player analyzing an opponent's position. Shaw's a soldier. He completes missions and moves on. But whoever sent him, this Cipher, she's still watching. And she knows something isn't adding up. He pulled up a digital map of Tokyo on the main monitor. Red pins clustered around specific districts. Each pin represented an asset in the Ghost network. Racers, mechanics, shop owners, all feeding information up the chain without realizing they were working for a dead man. "The Mercedes appeared in 3 locations this week," Han said, plotting the coordinates. "Azabu, Roppongi, and Shinagawa. That's not patrol pattern. That's searching for something specific. For you? For evidence I might still be alive." Sean absorbed this, his expression troubled. The kid had come a long way from the cocky American teenager who'd stumbled into Tokyo looking for drift cred. Han had offered him something more valuable than racing glory. Purpose. A mission. A way to be part of something that mattered. "The network's expanding," Sean reported, pulling up a spreadsheet on a tablet. "We've got 43 active collectors across Tokyo, another 27 in Osaka, 15 in Yokohama. They're reporting vehicle movements, unusual modifications at underground garages, foreign operators moving through the drift scene. And they still think they're just running an information trading network for money," Han confirmed. "Nobody knows you're alive except me and Twinkie. And Twinkie thinks he's building electronics for Mr. Park, not you." Compartmentalization was survival. Every layer of the network knew only what it needed to know. Information flowed up, never down. If one layer was compromised, the rest remained intact. "What about the intercept from Singapore?" Han asked. Sean pulled up another file. "Your guy at the port confirmed. Encrypted satellite phone call routed through multiple servers. We caught fragments before the encryption rotated. Someone referred to the Tokyo asset and CLEUP confirmation required." "Cipher," Han said quietly. "She's not satisfied with the official story. Then why doesn't she just send Shaw to confirm the kill? Because that would reveal she doesn't trust her own intelligence. As long as she's unsure, she's vulnerable. And vulnerability makes people careless." Han walked to another section of the warehouse where a second vehicle sat under a cover. He pulled the tarp away, revealing a heavily modified Nissan Skyline GTR R34. Midnight blue, aggressive body kit, every performance modification that money and expertise could provide. This wasn't the car Shaw had destroyed. That had been a decoy Han had arranged through underground channels. A similar model, planted to make the deception complete. "We're going to give her something to be certain about," Han said. "The Tokyo Bay Industrial Zone." The Tokyo Bay Industrial Zone came alive at night in ways it never did during the day. Shipping containers stacked like metal mountains, forklifts moving through pools of halogen light. And in the spaces between legitimate business, the underground thrived. Tonight's race was for something more valuable than pink slips or money. The prize sat in an armored briefcase held by a man who thought he was just a high-stakes courier for a legitimate tech company. He had no idea his employer was a shell corporation, had no idea the data inside that briefcase contained operational codes for a network that stretched across 3 continents, had no idea he was bait. Sean sat in the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution IN at the starting line, engine rumbling with barely contained violence. 5 other cars lined up beside him, Tokyo's finest street racers, all eager to win the mysterious prize. Han watched from a distance the blue R-34 idling in the shadows. His earpiece crackled with Sean's voice. In position. The briefcase guy is watching from the container stack, northeast corner. I see him, Han confirmed, his eyes tracking movement through the industrial landscape. 3 escort vehicles. Professional security. This isn't random courier work. You think it's connected to Cipher? Everything's connected to Cipher. We just don't know how yet. The race starter, a woman in designer streetwear who ran these events, raised her arms. The engines roared in anticipation. Then she dropped her arms, and the cars exploded forward in a symphony of turbocharged fury. Sean drove with the skill Han had instilled in him over countless hours of training. The Evo's all-wheel drive system clawed at the pavement, launching the car forward while the rear-wheel drive opponents struggled for traction. He drifted through the first corner, using the Scandinavian flick technique, to rotate the car without losing momentum. Han monitored the race on a tablet, but his attention was split. He was watching the escort vehicles, tracking their movements, calculating their response patterns. Professional, military training. These weren't rent-a-cops. Sean crossed the finish line first, claiming the briefcase. The courier approached, flanked by his escorts. Money changed hands. The appearance of legitimacy maintained. But as Sean took the briefcase and turned back toward the Evo, Han's blood ran cold. 3 black Mercedes appeared at the edges of the industrial zone, cutting off the exits. Sean, Han said urgently, "You've got company." Shaw's team, 3 vehicles, boxing you in. Through the earpiece, he heard Sean's sharp intake of breath. "I see them. What's the play?" "Stay calm. Get to your vehicle. I'm moving." But the Mercedes were already accelerating, their drivers executing a textbook pincer maneuver that would trap Sean between the containers and the bay. Professional, practiced, lethal. Sean made it to the Evo and fired the engine, but the Mercedes were closing fast. There was no way out that didn't end with a confrontation, unless someone changed the equation. The orange RX-7 screamed out of the shadows like a rotary-powered missile. Han had been waiting for this moment. 6 months of preparation. 6 months of building the Ghost Network. 6 months of staying dead. But some things were worth revealing yourself for. The RX-7 drifted sideways into the path of the lead Mercedes, the Fortune kit's wide body making the car seem impossibly large as it rotated. Han had timed it perfectly. The rear end of the RX-7 clipped the Mercedes' front wheel at exactly the right angle to send it into an uncontrolled spin. The first Mercedes crashed into a shipping container with a sound like thunder. The second Mercedes tried to ram Han head-on, but the RX-7 was already moving, already drifting, already 3 moves ahead. Han activated the smokescreen system, canisters mounted in the custom exhaust that deployed thick white smoke laced with thermal obscurance. The Mercedes disappeared into the cloud, blind. Han accelerated through the smoke, using memory and instinct to navigate while his opponents flailed. He emerged on the other side, positioned perfectly behind the third Mercedes that was pursuing Sean. The magnetic EMP device was inspired by technology Tej had demonstrated during their Rio planning sessions, modified and improved by Twinkie's electronics genius. Han activated it and threw it with practiced precision. The device latched onto the Mercedes' hood, electromagnetic pulse frying the vehicle's electrical system in an instant. The Mercedes died mid-chase, coasting to a stop as Sean disappeared into the Tokyo night. Han didn't stick around to admire his work. The RX-7 vanished back into the shadows, a ghost that had appeared for just long enough to save family. But Han knew what he'd left behind. Evidence. A piece of the Valeside Fortune kit had broken off in the collision with the first Mercedes. Not much, just a fragment of the custom bodywork. But enough. 3 blocks away, in the safety of another prepared safe house, Han monitored the radio chatter. Shaw's team had found the piece, were analyzing it, running it through databases. The Fortune kit, one operative reported over the encrypted channel. But that car was destroyed 6 months ago. Confirmed in the Tokyo Metro Police report. There was a long pause, then Shaw's voice, cold and measured. "Check again." Han listened as Shaw's team pulled up traffic camera footage from the Shibuya intersection, watched them search for any evidence of the RX-7's survival. Found nothing but the carefully curated narrative Han had left for them. The burning skyline, the planted evidence, the official death. Confusion rippled through the communication channel. Someone was operating in Tokyo with Han's signature style, in Han's signature car, using tactics that bore Han's fingerprints. But Han Seoul-Oh was confirmed dead. The seed of doubt had been planted, and doubt Han knew was a weapon more powerful than any gun. Doubt made people careless, made them second guess, made them vulnerable. Sean arrived at the safe house 20 minutes later, the briefcase secure. He looked shaken but exhilarated, the adrenaline high of survival mixing with the pride of a mission accomplished. "That was insane," Sean said, setting the briefcase on the table. Shaw's team saw the RX-7. "They're going to know. They're going to suspect," Han corrected. "Suspicion isn't knowledge, and knowledge isn't certainty. We operate in the space between." He opened the briefcase. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a portable hard drive, encrypted. But Han had tools for that. Software acquired through channels that would have made Brian's FBI contacts nervous. It took 3 hours to crack the encryption. When the files finally opened, Han felt vindication and dread in equal measure. Operational codes for a project referenced as part of Owen Shaw's work in Spain, references to advanced technology, mentions of Owen Shaw's operation, and, most importantly, communication logs referencing someone identified only as Cipher. And buried in those logs was a name that made Han's hands shake: Giselle Yashar. Status: asset acquired. Location: classified. The room seemed to tilt. Sean said something, but Han couldn't hear him over the roaring in his ears. Acquired. Not killed, not dead. Acquired. Han? Sean's voice cut through the static in his mind. Han, what is it? Han stared at the screen, reading and rereading the line. His mind raced through implications, possibilities, scenarios. Cipher had Giselle, had kept her alive for over a year, had used her for something: intelligence extraction, leverage, some purpose that required her survival, which meant everything Han had believed about that day in Spain was wrong. Giselle hadn't died because of the mission. She'd been taken, targeted, acquired like an asset in some larger game that Han was only now beginning to understand. The grief that had driven him into exile, into this underground existence in Tokyo, into becoming the Ghost King, all of it had been based on a false premise. She was alive. Somewhere in this world, Giselle was alive, and Cipher had her. Han stood, his movements mechanical. He walked to the communications array and began pulling up every file he had on Cipher's network, every scrap of intelligence, every intercepted communication, every breadcrumb trail that might lead to where they were keeping her. "Sean," Han said, his voice carrying a new edge, "call in every favor, activate every asset in the network. I don't care what it costs." "What are we looking for?" Han turned, and Sean took an involuntary step back at the expression on his mentor's face. It wasn't anger, it was something colder. "More absolute. We're going to find Giselle," Han said. "And then we're going to tear Cipher's entire operation apart, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but ash." The Ghost King had found his purpose. And God help anyone who stood in his way. 3 months later, Los Angeles. The Toretto house stood exactly as it had for decades, a monument to family, to loyalty, to the simple truth that blood and brotherhood mattered more than anything else in this world. But the garage where Dom and Brian worked carried a weight now, a heaviness that settled over everything like morning fog that never quite burned away. 9 months since Han's death. 9 months since the phone call from Tokyo that had torn a hole through the family. Dominic Toretto stood at his workbench, rebuilding a transmission with the methodical precision that had always been his meditation. His massive hands moved over the machinery with surprising delicacy, years of experience translating into muscle memory. But his mind wasn't on the work. It never was anymore. Brian O'Connor sat nearby, laptop open, files scattered across the secondary workbench. Former FBI, former street racer, current brother-in-arms and family. He'd been investigating for months now, chasing threads that led nowhere, following breadcrumbs that evaporated before he could reach them. "Hobbs says Shaw is still in Asia," Brian said, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice carried that analytical edge that came from years of investigating what others wanted hidden. "Hasn't left since Tokyo," Dom grunted, not looking up from the transmission. "He got what he wanted. Then why is he still there?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Dom's hands paused for just a moment, imperceptible to anyone who didn't know him as well as Brian did. Then he resumed working, but the tension had ratcheted up a notch. "Brian, I know, but something doesn't add up." It was an old argument by now. Brian couldn't let it go. The investigator in him saw patterns that didn't quite fit, details that felt wrong. Dom, meanwhile, carried his grief like armor, using it to protect himself from hope that might just be another kind of pain. Letty watched from the porch, leaning against the railing with a beer in hand. She understood both men, understood Brian's need for answers and Dom's need for closure. She'd been dead once, after all, or at least everyone had thought so. She knew what it felt like to be erased from the world. "You two planning to argue all day or actually get some work done?" she called out. Brian smiled despite himself. Work. Definitely work. But then all three phones went off simultaneously. A notification ping that cut through the afternoon like a gunshot. Unknown sender. Encrypted routing. And a file format that made Brian's FBI instincts kick into overdrive. Dom pulled out his phone first, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to something harder to define. Brian was already analyzing the message metadata on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. "This encryption," Brian muttered, "it's military grade. But the routing, it's bouncing through servers in 3 different countries. Singapore, Berlin, Cairo. Can you trace it? Whoever sent this knows what they're doing." Dom opened the file. It was an audio file, small and compressed. He hit play. Static filled the garage, white noise that seemed to carry weight. Then, cutting through it, a pattern emerged. Not voice, not music. Morse code. Dom's eyes widened. His father had taught him Morse as a kid, using the old CB radio in this very garage. It was a language from another era, a code that most of the world had forgotten. But someone remembered. The message was 3 words, repeated twice for clarity. Shaw missed. Brian leaned in, his analytical mind already racing. "That's the Rio frequency. The emergency protocol we set up during the heist. No one outside the crew knows that code." "Play it again," Dom said, his voice tight. The Morse code repeated. Shaw missed. Shaw missed. Then a second file loaded automatically. Video footage, grainy but clear enough. Timestamp, 6 months ago. Location data embedded in the metadata. The screen showed Deckard Shaw's face. Unmistakable. He was in what appeared to be a London safe house talking on a phone. The timestamp matched exactly with the night of Han's death in Tokyo. Down to the minute, down to the second. "That's impossible," Brian whispered. "Shaw couldn't be in 2 places at once. Unless he wasn't alone. Unless someone had helped him. Unless the entire operation had been coordinated by someone with resources that dwarfed anything they'd encountered before." A third file loaded. This one was a document. Comprehensive, detailed, meticulously researched. Shaw's complete dossier. Current locations. Safe houses. Known associates. Financial records. Operational history. Someone had handed them Deckard Shaw on a silver platter, and at the bottom of the document a single line of text appeared. The shadow is named Cipher - Ghost. The garage fell absolutely silent. Dom stared at the message, his mind trying to process what his eyes were seeing. Brian's fingers had frozen over the keyboard, his investigative instincts screaming that something monumental was happening. "Who the hell is Ghost?" Dom said finally. Brian's mind was already racing through possibilities. Someone who knows how we operate. Someone who is in Rio. Someone with access to our emergency protocols. He pulled up the crew roster, checking them off mentally. Roman, Tej, Letty, Mia. Everyone had checked in after Han's death. Everyone had attended the funeral. Everyone was accounted for. "The crew's accounted for," Dom said, voicing Brian's thoughts. Everyone checked in after Han. Brian's eyes widened as realization crashed over him like a wave. He pulled up Han's file, scanning through the details with shaking hands. Date of death, 9 months ago. Location, Tokyo. Cause, traffic accident during illegal street racing. Then he cross-referenced the encryption pattern on the ghost message against communication signatures from the Rio heist. Ran a comparative analysis using software that cost more than most people's houses. The patterns matched. Not similar. Matched. Same encryption methodology. Same routing protocols. Same digital fingerprint that was as unique as a human thumbprint. It can't be, Brian whispered. Dom turned to face him. Something flickering in his eyes that might have been hope or might have been fury. What? The encryption signature. It matches Han's old communication patterns from Rio. Exactly. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The implications were too massive, too impossible, too much like hope that might shatter if examined too closely. Then Dom's phone rang. Unknown number. Same encrypted routing as the message, Dom answered without hesitation. Who is this? The voice that came through the phone was calm, measured, and achingly familiar. You taught me family means never turning your back, even when the world thinks you're dead. Dom's world tilted on its axis. He knew that voice, had known it for years, had heard it crack jokes, make observations, offer quiet support when the world felt like too much, had heard it eulogized at a funeral 9 months ago. Han? The name came out strangled, caught between disbelief and desperate hope. 3,000 miles away, Tokyo. Han Seoul-Oh stood on a rooftop overlooking Shibuya, phone pressed to his ear. The intersection where he'd died glowed below, neon reflecting off rain-slicked streets. 9 months since he'd faked his death. 9 months since he'd cut contact with his family to protect them. 9 months of being a ghost. But ghosts could come back, and this one had work to do. I couldn't risk leading them to you, Han said, his voice carrying across the distance with perfect clarity. But now they're coming anyway. And they're not just after Shaw's revenge anymore, Dom. This goes deeper. He could hear the controlled fury and relief in Dom's breathing. Could picture his brother, because that's what Dom was, blood or not, standing in that LA garage, trying to process impossible news. Where are you? I've been tracking the network. There's someone behind Shaw, behind Owen, behind everything. Calls herself Cipher. Another voice cut in. Brian, always the investigator. Han, you're alive? Nice to hear your voice too, Brian. I've got Shaw's coordinates. I've got Cipher's network structure. But I need the muscle. Dom's voice came back, harder now, focused. We're on the next plane. Han allowed himself a small smile. I was hoping you'd say that. Why now? Brian asked. Why reach out after 9 months? Because I found something. Something that changes everything. Han paused, choosing his words carefully. It's about Giselle. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. She's alive, Dom. Cipher took her in Spain. I've got proof, and I'm going to get her back. But I can't do it alone. There was a long moment where Han could hear consultation happening on the other end. Voices conferring, plans forming, family rallying. Then Dom came back on the line, and his voice carried absolute certainty. We're coming. Get ready. There's more, Han said. I need you to reach out to Roman and Tej. Tell them the ghost is real. Tell them to start preparing for operations across 3 continents. What are we walking into? A war, Han said simply. Cipher's built a global network. We're going to burn it to the ground. But first, we're going to get Giselle back. Brian's voice came through, analytical and focused. Send us everything you have. Cipher's structure, Shaw's locations, any intelligence on where they're keeping Giselle. Sending it now, Han confirmed, his fingers already moving across a tablet. But Brian, you need to understand something. This isn't like Owen Shaw or any crew we've faced before. Cipher operates in the shadows. She's got resources that rival nation-states, and she's been planning this for years. Then we plan better, Dom said with finality. Han watched the city lights blur together through the rain. His reflection in the glass showed a man who'd been forged in 9 months of isolation into something harder, colder, more dangerous. But seeing that reflection now, knowing his family was coming, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not just purpose. Home. "Welcome back to the family, Han," he whispered to himself. Then he ended the call and began preparing for the reunion he'd thought would never happen. The Ghost King was about to become Han Seoul-Oh again, and God help Cipher when the family reunited. Back in Los Angeles, Dom stood motionless, the phone still in his hand even though the call had ended. Brian watched him, seeing the transformation happening in real time, grief converting to purpose, loss becoming fuel for something that looked a lot like vengeance. "Han's alive," Dom said, and there was wonder in his voice. "And Giselle might be alive too," Brian finished. Letty had come down from the porch, drawn by the intensity of the moment. "What's happening?" Dom looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in 9 months. Fire. "We're going to Tokyo," Dom said. "We're going to get our brother. And then we're going to war." He pulled out his phone and started making calls. Roman first. The conversation would be brief and loud. Then Tej, analytical, already thinking about the logistics. The pieces were falling into place. The family was mobilizing. Brian sat back at his laptop, already pulling up flight manifests, safe house locations in Tokyo, tactical gear suppliers. His mind was operating on multiple tracks simultaneously. Investigator, strategist, brother. "Cipher," he muttered, typing the name into multiple databases. "Who the hell are you?" The searches came back with nothing, no hits in FBI databases, no Interpol records, nothing in the international intelligence networks he still had access to through old contacts. Whoever Cipher was, she existed completely off the grid, which meant she was either incredibly good or incredibly protected. Probably both. "We're going to need firepower," Brian said. "If Cipher orchestrated Owen Shaw's operation and hired Deckard Shaw for revenge, she's got serious resources." "Then we match them," Dom said simply. "Whatever it takes." Letty cracked her knuckles, a predatory smile crossing her face. "I've been getting soft. Time to remember what we do best." "And what's that?" Brian asked, though he already knew the answer. "We protect family," Dom said, "no matter what." The garage fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not grief, not loss. Preparation. Somewhere in Tokyo, Han was building an empire in the shadows, building a network that could challenge a ghost, building a weapon that could strike at the heart of an organization that thought itself untouchable. And in Los Angeles, the family was coming together again, harder, stronger, united by the impossible truth that one of their own had returned from the dead. Cipher had made a mistake. She'd thought killing Han would break the family. Instead, she'd given them something more dangerous than anything she could imagine. Hope. And hope, wielded by people like Dom Toretto and his crew, was the most dangerous weapon in the world. The private jet touched down at Narita International at exactly 2:17 a.m. local time. Dom and Brian emerged into Tokyo's humid night, dressed in dark tactical streetwear that could pass for civilian clothes but concealed enough hardware to start a small war. Neither man had slept on the flight. Sleep required letting your guard down, and they were walking into enemy territory with nothing but Han's intelligence and their own skills to keep them alive. The terminal was nearly empty at this hour, just a few exhausted business travelers and cleaning crews going through their routines. Dom and Brian moved through customs with passports that Tej had arranged. Not fake exactly, but creatively interpreted regarding their actual identities. Outside, a figure waited beside a black Nissan GT-R R35. Sean Boswell had grown up since Tokyo Drift. The cocky American teenager had been refined by 9 months under Han's tutelage into something harder. His posture was different, more aware, more controlled. His eyes scanned the parking structure with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in surveillance. "Gentlemen," Sean said, his accent still American but his mannerisms distinctly shaped by Tokyo. Han said, "You'd appreciate discretion. I'm your driver." Dom studied the young man, seeing echoes of the crew in his bearing. Han had trained him well. Where is he? Dom's voice carried that characteristic rumble. Not threatening, but absolutely serious. Sean smirked, and for a moment the old cockiness flickered through. "Still dead as far as Tokyo's concerned. Get in. This city has eyes, and not all of them are friendly." They climbed into the GTR, Brian taking the front passenger seat while Dom folded his considerable frame into the back. The car was immaculate, modified for performance, but not flashy. Tactical. Sean navigated through Tokyo's late-night traffic with the fluid precision of someone who knew these streets like his own heartbeat. He didn't speak, didn't offer explanations, just drove with the focused intensity that told Dom this kid had learned well from Han. The route took them away from the tourist districts, away from the neon and the crowds, into industrial zones that most visitors never saw. Warehouses, manufacturing plants, the bones of the city hidden beneath its glittering skin. Finally, Sean pulled up to what appeared to be just another abandoned building. Rusted metal, broken windows, the kind of place you wouldn't look at twice. "Welcome to the Ghost Garage," Sean said, killing the engine. "Leave your phones." No digital footprint past this point. Brian raised an eyebrow but complied, following Dom's lead. They secured their phones in the GTR's glove compartment and followed Sean through a service entrance that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Then they stepped through the door, and everything changed. The interior was a revelation. Professional-grade lighting illuminated a workspace that could rival any intelligence agency's operations center. The orange RX-7 sat on a hydraulic lift, partially disassembled, surrounded by tools and equipment that spoke of constant refinement. But that was just the surface. 3 walls of monitors displayed a dizzying array of real-time intelligence. Tokyo street cameras, traffic patterns, communication intercepts, maps studded with pins. It was the kind of setup that took months to build and millions to fund. And there, working at a computer station with his back to them, was Han. For a moment, neither Dom nor Brian moved. They'd intellectually accepted that Han was alive, had heard his voice on the phone, had made the flight based on faith in that impossibility. But seeing him, solid and real and undeniably alive, was something else entirely. Han straightened slowly, turned around, made eye contact with Dom. The garage fell absolutely silent. 9 months. 9 months of grief, of guilt, of living with the hole that Han's death had torn through the family. 9 months of Dom carrying the weight of not being able to protect one of his own. All of it crystallized in this moment. Then Dom crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled Han into a crushing embrace. Not gentle, not tentative, a full-body collision that spoke louder than any words ever could. "Don't you ever do that again," Dom said, his voice low and dangerous and cracking with emotion. "Wasn't planning on dying twice," Han replied, returning the embrace with equal intensity. They stood like that for a long moment, 2 brothers reunited after impossible circumstances. Then Brian stepped forward, and Han extended an arm to include him in the embrace. "We buried an empty casket," Brian said, and there was accusation mixed with relief in his voice. "I know. I'm sorry." Han stepped back, looking at both of them with eyes that carried 9 months of isolation. "But if they knew I was alive, they'd have come for all of you. I couldn't take that risk." Dom understood. Hated it, but understood it. That was the weight of family. Sometimes protecting them meant breaking their hearts. "Show us what you've built," Dom said finally. Han led them to the war room, a section of the warehouse dedicated entirely to intelligence gathering and analysis. He spread his collected evidence across a tactical table like a general planning a campaign. Photos of operatives connected to Cipher's network, Shaw's movement patterns across Asia and Europe, communication intercepts, financial records, a web of connections that painted a picture of an organization far larger and more dangerous than anything they'd faced before. "Cipher's network," Han began, his voice slipping into the analytical mode that Brian recognized from their Rio planning sessions. "Global operation. Military-grade capabilities. She's been operating in the shadows for years, manipulating events to her advantage." He pulled up a photo of Owen Shaw. Fast 6 wasn't just about the device, it was about establishing Cipher's capability to orchestrate large-scale operations. Owen was her asset, her proof of concept. "And when we stopped Owen," Brian said, following the logic, "she sent his brother for revenge. Partially. Han pulled up surveillance footage of Deckard Shaw in Tokyo. But I was already a target before that. The money I was skimming from the Yakuza? Turns out those accounts had connections to Cipher's financial network. I was stealing from her without knowing it." Dom absorbed this, his tactical mind putting pieces together. "So Shaw killing you accomplished 2 objectives, revenge for Owen and eliminating a threat to her operations." "Exactly. But she didn't count on me surviving. And she definitely didn't count on me building this." Han gestured to the ghost network infrastructure around them. He explained the system he'd created: racers across Asia reporting intelligence, analog communications that bypassed digital surveillance, a human network that operated completely off Cipher's radar. She relies on technology, Han said, surveillance, digital infiltration, but she can't hack human relationships, can't monitor conversations that never touch a network. That's her weakness. You weaponized the underground racing scene. I weaponized what I know best: community, loyalty, family. Han paused, but there's more. He pulled up the file that had changed everything: the operational data from the Tokyo Bay intercept, the reference to Giselle. Asset acquired, status alive. Dom read the words, his expression darkening. Where is she? I don't know yet. The files indicate multiple secure facilities. But if Cipher kept Giselle alive this long, she's valuable. Intelligence asset. Leverage. Something worth protecting. Han's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he pulled up more data. According to what I've pieced together, Giselle had Mossad-level intelligence on Middle Eastern networks. Cipher needed that information to access secure facilities. Arms dealers, intelligence networks, military installations. Giselle wasn't just muscle, Brian said quietly. Understanding dawning. She was intelligence gold. Her Mossad background gave her access to networks that even someone like Cipher couldn't crack easily. Quote, taking her alive was always the objective, Han confirmed. The Spain operation, Owen Shaw wasn't just trying to complete his mission. He was extracting Giselle for Cipher. Dom's jaw clenched. She played both sides, used Owen to get what she wanted, and when we stopped him, she still got Giselle. The revelation hit like a physical blow. They'd celebrated their victory in Spain, not realizing Cipher had turned their win into her advantage. Then we find her, Dom said with absolute finality. That's not optional. Agreed. But first, we need to dismantle Cipher's operational capability. According to the intelligence I've gathered, she's planning something big. Operations in Berlin, integration with advanced surveillance technology, the ability to control global infrastructure. Brian leaned over the tactical table, studying the intelligence. If we stop her primary operations, we cut off her resources. But she'll know we're coming. Let her know, Dom said. We're not hiding anymore. Han nodded slowly. Roman and Tej? Landing in 6 hours, Brian confirmed. Hobbs is monitoring Shaw's movements from a distance. We've got eyes on the major players. Then we have 48 hours to send Cipher a message she can't ignore. What kind of message? Dom asked. Han's expression was cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. The kind that reminds her why you never, ever come after family. But Tokyo had other plans. The first indication something was wrong came from Sean, monitoring the street camera network from a secondary terminal. Han, we've got movement. 3 black Mercedes SUVs heading toward Azabu District. The same vehicles from the Tokyo Bay operation. Han's eyes narrowed. Shaw's people. They're still investigating. Or they found the safe house we were scouting earlier, Brian said. Dom was already moving toward the door. Then we go see what they want. Dom, wait. Han started, but Dom was already out the door. Brian looked at Han. You know there's no stopping him when he's like this. Yeah, Han said, grabbing a tactical vest from a weapons locker. I remember. The Ghost Network had protocols for situations like this, but Dom operated on instinct and loyalty, not operational security, which was exactly why he was such an effective force of nature. The Azabu district glowed with expensive elegance, upscale boutiques, trendy restaurants, the kind of place where Tokyo's wealthy went to see and be seen. And moving through it like sharks through expensive waters were 3 Mercedes SUVs filled with enforcers who had no idea they were working for Cipher's network. Dom and Brian had taken Sean's GTR, moving through the district with tactical awareness. They parked 2 blocks from the location Han had identified, approaching on foot. That's when the trap sprang. The Mercedes appeared from 3 directions simultaneously, boxing them in with professional precision. Doors opened and men poured out, not random street thugs, but trained operators with the bearing of military contractors, expensive suits concealing weapons, Yakuza tattoos visible on hands and necks, and expressions that said they'd been paid very well to eliminate American interference. "Brian," Dom said calmly, cracking his knuckles. "Just like old times?" "Just like old times," Brian confirmed, settling into a fighting stance. The enforcers rushed them as one. Dom took the first three with brutal efficiency. A right hook that could dent steel, a knee strike that lifted a man off his feet, an elbow that ended the fight before it really started. He fought like a force of nature, unstoppable and absolutely confident. Brian was more tactical, using leverage and precision to compensate for being smaller than Dom. He disarmed one enforcer, used the momentum to throw another into a third, created space and angles that turned numbers into disadvantages. But there were too many. For every enforcer they dropped, two more appeared, and one of them had drawn a pistol, was taking aim at Brian's center mass from behind. The high-pitched scream of a rotary engine cut through the night like a banshee's wail. The orange RX-7 drifted around the corner sideways, Han's driver door open, his form leaning out with a pistol in hand and an expression of absolute focus. The tactical drift sequence was poetry written in burning rubber and calculated violence. First pass, Han used the RX-7's rear end like a battering ram, clipping two enforcers with precise angles that sent them sprawling without killing them. Non-lethal, but absolutely effective. Handbrake spin. The car rotated 180 degrees in place, a perfect pivot that positioned Han's pistol perfectly. 3 shots, 3 Mercedes tires destroyed. Professional marksmanship at speed. Smokescreen, Han activated the exhaust-mounted deployment system. Thick white smoke laced with thermal obscurants filled the street, turning visibility to 0. Second drift. The RX-7 swung back around, positioning itself between the enforcers and Dom and Brian. The passenger and rear doors opened. "Get in!" Han shouted. Dom and Brian didn't hesitate. They dove into the moving car, Brian in the passenger seat, Dom half sitting on the center console because there literally wasn't room for a man his size in a drift car's back seat. Han accelerated before the doors fully closed, the RX-7 disappearing into Tokyo's arterial network with the enforcers still blind in the smoke. Inside the car, cramped and running on pure adrenaline, Brian started laughing. "I missed this," he said, trying to catch his breath. Han shifted gears with mechanical precision, drifting through a corner that should have required slowing down. "I know." Dom, wedged uncomfortably in the back, looked at Han's profile. "The Yakuza's working for Cipher. They don't know it. Shell companies. Legitimate fronts. But yeah." Han navigated through Tokyo with the certainty of someone who'd mapped every alley, every side street, every escape route in his mind. The RX-7 flowed through the city like water finding its level. Natural, inevitable, impossible to catch. "Where are we going?" Brian asked. "Back to the Ghost Garage. We need to accelerate the timeline." Han's expression was grim. "Cipher knows we're here now, which means she'll move her operations up." "Good," Dom rumbled from the back. "Let her come." "We're ready." Han glanced at Dom in the rearview mirror. Saw the fire there. The certainty. The absolute conviction that family would prevail because family always did. And despite 9 months of being a ghost, despite all the tactical planning and careful preparation, Han felt something he hadn't felt since discovering Giselle was alive. Hope. The crew was assembled when they arrived. Roman Pierce had arrived first. Of course, he always did when there was the possibility of action. He stood near the RX-7, examining the smokescreen system with a mixture of appreciation and his characteristic bravado. "Yo, I knew you weren't dead," Roman announced when he saw Han. "I knew it." Tej Parker, standing beside him with a tablet in hand, gave Roland a withering look. "You cried at the funeral, man." Tears of suspicion. Despite the violence, the danger, the impossible circumstances, everyone laughed. It was the first genuine moment of levity in 9 months, and it felt like oxygen after drowning. Han crossed to Roman and pulled him into an embrace. "Good to see you too, Ron. Man, you got some explaining to do. You let us bury an empty casket?" "Had to be convincing," Han said simply. Tej stepped forward next, his analytical mind already cataloging the Ghost Garage setup with professional appreciation. "This network you built, it's brilliant. Low-tech human intelligence defeating high-tech surveillance. And I had a good teacher," Han said, nodding at Dom. The big man stood at the center of his assembled family, and for the first time in 9 months he looked complete, not just present but whole. The crew had lost Han, and in losing him had lost a piece of themselves. Now they had him back, and they had purpose. Han spread the intelligence across the war room table again, bringing everyone up to speed. The mission parameters were complex but clear. Phase 1. Trap Deckard Shaw in London. Extract confirmation of Cipher's plans and identity. Phase 2. Dismantle Cipher's network before she could execute her operations. Phase 3. Find Cipher's location and eliminate the threat permanently. And underlying all of it, find Giselle. Shaw's our opening move, Han explained. He's still in Tokyo, still investigating reports of the RX-7. If we can trap him, break him, we can get direct intelligence on Cipher's operation. And if he doesn't break, Roman asked. Dom's expression was granite. Everyone breaks eventually. Brian pulled up logistics on his laptop. Shaw's a trained SAS operator. Taking him requires overwhelming force or absolute precision. Probably both. Then we give him both, Han said. He pulled up new schematics, plans he'd been developing for months. The Ghost network spans Tokyo, but I've been expanding into Europe. London, Paris, Berlin. We've got eyes everywhere Shaw operates. Tej studied the network architecture. Impressed despite himself. You built a counter-surveillance network using street racers. That's actually genius. It's what we do, Han said simply. We know cars, we know streets, we know community. Cipher operates in cyberspace. We operate in the real world. Dom stood at the head of the table, looking at his assembled family. Brian, his brother in all but blood. Han returned from death. Roman and Tej, loyal since the beginning. And outside, Sean, the next generation already being trained in their ways. Shaw came after us because we're family, Dom said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Let's show him what family means. Everyone placed a hand in the center of the table, the circle of brotherhood, complete. For Han, Dom said. For Giselle, Brian added. For family, they finished together. Han stood back, watching the crew fall into planning mode with the efficiency of people who'd worked together for years. Roman and Tej arguing about technical specifications, Brian mapping out tactical approaches, Dom providing the strategic anchor that held everything together. This was what he'd given up 9 months ago. This was what being the Ghost King had cost him, but it was also what had kept them safe, what had given him the time and space to build something that could fight Cipher on her own terms. For 9 months, I was a ghost, Han said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Now, I'm the king of this underground, and we're taking back our streets. Dom looked over, caught his eye, nodded once, understanding and approval and brotherhood, all in that single gesture. The Ghost King had returned to the family, and together they were going to remind the world why you never, ever crossed the Toretto crew. 1 week later, London, the rain fell on London like it had a personal grudge against the city. Not the romantic drizzle of movies, but the cold, penetrating British rain that soaked through leather and found every gap in supposedly waterproof gear. The kind of rain that made you question why humans ever decided to build cities this far north. Deckard Shaw stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his converted warehouse headquarters in East London, watching the Thames flow dark and heavy beneath the city's lights. The facility was everything he needed, secure, private, equipped with military-grade technology that would make most intelligence agencies jealous. He built this place after Owen's imprisonment, after everything had fallen apart in Spain. Built it as a fortress and a monument, a reminder that the Shaw family didn't break, didn't surrender, didn't forgive. Behind him, the operations center hummed with activity. 6 analysts worked at computer stations, monitoring feeds from across Europe and Asia. Shaw's network was smaller than Cipher's, more personal, but what it lacked in scale it made up for in loyalty. These were men and women who'd served with him in the SAS, who'd followed him into the private sector when military life proved too restrictive, who understood that sometimes justice required operating outside the law. Sir, one of the analysts called out, Young, efficient XMI6. We've got another sighting. Tokyo, Azabu District. The orange RX-7. Shaw turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. Show me. The footage played on the main monitor. Street camera feed from 3 nights ago. The RX-7 executing that signature drift maneuver, smoke screen deploying, disappearing into Tokyo's maze with 3 Mercedes in pursuit. It was the 4th sighting in 2 weeks. Each one impossible. Each one raising questions that Shaw couldn't answer. Run the vehicle analysis again, Shaw ordered. Already done, sir. Veilside Fortune kit matches Han Seoul-Oh's destroyed vehicle to 97% accuracy. Same modifications, same paint scheme, same driving style. And Han Seoul-Oh is confirmed dead. Tokyo Metro Police confirmed the scene. Autopsy report on the burned remains. Closed case. Shaw studied the footage, his tactical mind working through scenarios. Someone was operating in Tokyo with Han's car, Han's style, Han's signature. Someone wanted him to doubt the kill. But why? Pull up the Shibuya intersection footage again, Shaw said. The analyst hesitated. Sir, we've reviewed it 17 times. There's no evidence of... Pull it up. The burning Nissan Skyline, the planted cross necklace, a replica Shaw had commissioned specifically to send a message to Toretto. Shaw himself making the phone call to Dominic Toretto. Everything perfect. Everything according to plan. But perfection itself was suspicious. Shaw had executed hundreds of operations across 3 continents, had learned to trust his instincts when something felt wrong. And this felt wrong. Contact our Tokyo assets, Shaw ordered. I want eyes on every garage, every safe house, every location where that RX-7 has been spotted. If someone's copying Han Seoul-Oh's methods, I want to know who and why. And if it actually is Han, sir? Then I finish what I started. He turned back to the window, watching London's lights blur together through the rain. Somewhere out there, Cipher was monitoring his progress, evaluating his performance, deciding whether he remained useful or had become a liability. Shaw hated working for her, hated the manipulation, the chess games, the feeling that he was a piece being moved by an invisible hand. But Cipher paid well and provided resources that made impossible missions achievable. And she'd given him what he wanted most, revenge for Owen, or so he thought. Now doubt crept in like the London rain, cold, persistent, impossible to ignore. 2 miles from Shaw's headquarters, the trap was being set. Brian O'Connor sat in a converted surveillance van surrounded by monitors showing feeds from 30 different cameras. Tej worked beside him, fingers flying across keyboards as he coordinated the technical aspects of the operation. Shaw's intelligence network just pinged our decoy convoy, Tej reported. He's taken the bait. Brian studied the tactical map on the central monitor. Red dots represented Shaw's team, 3 assault vehicles moving through London's streets toward what they believed was a shipment of advanced surveillance components. Blue dots represented the crew's positions, strategically placed throughout the Docklands. It was an elaborate trap, built on Brian's tactical planning and Han's ghost network intelligence. Weeks of preparation compressed into one night. Han, you're up, Brian said into his radio. 3 blocks away, Han sat in the orange RX-7, engine idling, watching the streets through rain-streaked windows. The car had been modified specifically for this operation. EMP shielding, smokescreen system, communications array that could jam signals in a 3-block radius. In position, Han confirmed. His voice carried that characteristic calm that came before action. Shaw's convoy is 2 minutes out. Don's voice came through the radio next, rough and ready. Remember the plan. We box them in, we don't engage directly. This is about sending a message, not starting a war. Copy that, Roman chimed in from his position. Though personally, I vote for the war option. You always vote for the war option, Tej muttered. And I'm always right. Brian smiled despite the tension. Some things never changed. Roman's bravado was as reliable as sunrise, and in situations like this, it was almost comforting. All units, radio silence from here, Brian ordered. Execute on my mark. The convoy appeared exactly where Brian's predictive modeling said it would. 3 Mercedes, armored, professional, moving with military precision. Shaw's people had intelligence, had resources, had training. But they were walking into a trap designed by people who'd spent years outsmarting organizations with far more power. Now, Brian said quietly. Han activated the localized EMP field. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Every street camera in a 3-block radius went dark. Every traffic light shut down. Every electronic device not specifically shielded against electromagnetic pulse simply died. Inside Shaw's lead vehicle, the driver cursed as the radio went to static. "Sir, we've lost communications," he reported. Shaw's voice remained calm over the dying connection. "What's happening? Cameras are offline. Comms are..." Shaw's team was blind, deaf, and isolated in the heart of London's Docklands, with no way to call for backup and no electronic surveillance to guide them. The driver made the tactical decision to continue toward the target. The convoy pressed forward through the dead zone, moving by visual navigation alone. They didn't see the 30 remote-controlled cars until it was too late. Brian had borrowed the concept from Tokyo's drift racing scene, scaled it up, and added his own tactical innovations. The RC cars weren't toys. They were one-quarter scale vehicles, heavily modified, fast enough to keep pace with real traffic. And there were dozens of them. They swarmed out of side streets and parking structures like a mechanical flood, moving with coordinated precision. Not attacking, but herding, creating physical barriers that forced Shaw's convoy into tighter and tighter confines. The Mercedes tried to maneuver around them, but the RC cars adjusted faster, predicted their movements, boxed them in with ruthless efficiency. "What the hell is this?" Shaw's driver demanded, knowing no one could hear him. The convoy was being pushed toward a specific location, a dead-end alley between two abandoned warehouses. The RC cars formed walls of moving metal, making it impossible to turn back without destroying their own vehicles. And then the real trap closed. 24 street racers drove in from both ends of the alley simultaneously. These were Han's people, coordinated by Sean Boswell, and brought in from the European Ghost Network specifically for this operation. Every one of them a skilled driver. Every one of them loyal to the Ghost King who'd given them purpose beyond racing. Their cars formed perfect barriers at both ends of the alley. Shaw's convoy was boxed in completely. Warehouses on either side, racers blocking both exits. RC cars still swarming to prevent any escape attempt. Inside the lead Mercedes, Shaw realized what was happening. This wasn't random. This was planned. This was personal. He reached for his weapon, a Heckler & Koch USP that had served him well in a dozen combat zones. But even as his fingers closed around the grip, he knew guns wouldn't solve this problem. Whoever had orchestrated this trap wanted him alive and aware. A knock on the window made him turn. Han stood there in the rain, calm as glass, no helmet. The moment stretched. Shaw stared at a man he'd watched die 9 months ago. A man whose death he'd confirmed personally. A man who was absolutely, impossibly, standing outside his vehicle in a London alley. Shaw exited the Mercedes slowly, hands visible but not surrendering. His tactical mind raced through possibilities. Clone? Body double? Some kind of elaborate illusion. But the man's eyes told him everything. Those were Han's eyes. Quiet, calculating, carrying memories of shared history, or at least memories of the mission Shaw had executed. "Impossible," Shaw said, his voice flat. "That's what your analyst said about the RX-7, Han replied. Shaw's jaw tightened. "I watched you die." Han stepped closer, rain streaming down his face. "You watched a car burn, but you made 2 mistakes. The alley seemed to hold its breath. 30 cars, engines idling. A standoff built on impossible truths. First mistake," Han continued, "you assumed killing one of us would break the family. It doesn't work that way. And the second," Han's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, if smiles could be carved from ice. "You missed." Dom and Brian emerged from the shadows, flanking Han like guardians materializing from nowhere. Shaw found himself facing 3 men who represented everything he'd been hired to destroy. Dom's physical presence was legendary. 6 feet of muscle and unshakable will. Brian carried himself with the tactical awareness of someone who'd been both hunter, and Han stood between them, the ghost made flesh. "You came after my family," Dom rumbled. "Now you're going to tell us about Cipher." Shaw looked around, counted vehicles, assessed the tactical situation. He was completely outmaneuvered, outgunned, outsmarted. For a man who'd built a career on being 3 steps ahead of his enemies, it was a humbling experience. "You think trapping me accomplishes anything?" Shaw said, defaulting to professional detachment. "Cipher doesn't care if I'm captured." "We're not capturing you," Han said. We're giving you a choice. Brian stepped forward, his voice carrying the analytical edge that came from years as an investigator. You can do this the easy way, talk, or the hard way. Roman's voice called out from one of the cars, breaking the tension with characteristic humor. I vote hard way. Despite everything, Shaw felt a grudging respect. This crew had tracked him across continents, predicted his movements, built an operation sophisticated enough to trap a trained SAS operative. They were good, maybe good enough to actually challenge Cipher. What do you want to know? Shaw asked finally. The warehouse was stripped bare except for a single chair in the center. Shaw sat there, not restrained, a deliberate choice that spoke of confidence rather than trust. The crew surrounded him in a loose circle. Dom stood directly in front, arms crossed, an immovable object. Brian paced, his mind clearly working through questions and strategies. Han remained still, watching with those calculating eyes. You killed me on Cipher's orders, Han began. Not a question, a statement requiring confirmation or denial. Why? Owen was family. You put him in a coma. True, Han acknowledged. But that's not why you targeted me first. You could have gone after Dom, Brian, any of them. Why Tokyo? The silence confirmed what Han already suspected. Because Cipher told you to, Han continued, his voice never rising but carrying absolute certainty. Because I was interfering with her operations without knowing it. The revenge story? That was just cover. Shaw's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his professional armor. Grudging respect flickered across his face. You're smarter than she gave you credit for, Shaw admitted. Brian leaned in, investigator mode fully engaged. Where is she? Everywhere. Nowhere. Shaw's laugh was bitter. You can't catch her. She doesn't exist in one place. Tej spoke up from his position near a laptop setup. Everything exists somewhere. Server farms, communication hubs. She's been building this network for years. You're 3 steps behind, and you don't even know what game you're playing. Dom's voice cut through like a blade. Then enlighten us. Shaw leaned back, weighing his options. He'd worked for Cipher for 2 years, completed 8 major operations, been paid handsomely for each one. But loyalty was a currency that lost value when you realized you were expendable, and Han's survival proved that Shaw was expendable. Cipher had told him the target was eliminated, had confirmed the kill, had moved on to other operations. But she'd been wrong, which meant either her intelligence was flawed or she'd lied to him. Either way, it suggested Shaw's usefulness to her was limited. Cipher wants advanced surveillance integration, Shaw said finally. Not to steal technology, to integrate it with her existing network. Once she has global visual coverage plus her cyber infrastructure, she'll be unstoppable. Brian's eyes narrowed. She's going after surveillance systems? She's planning operations to acquire components. Berlin, Singapore, other targets, each one designed to give her pieces of a larger system. When? Han asked. You're already running out of time. She's accelerating operations. 2 weeks, maybe less. Dom's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop. Then we have 2 weeks to stop it. You can't. Shaw's voice carried professional certainty. Her crew is already assembled. Russian military defectors. The best drivers in Europe. You don't have the manpower. Han pulled out a tablet, his movements deliberate. He turned it toward Shaw, displaying a map of Europe covered in pins. Hundreds of them, clustered around major cities. Every pin is a street racer in my network, Han said. Berlin, Paris, Prague, London. I've got eyes everywhere. Your unstoppable crew? We'll see them coming a mile away. Shaw stared at the map, and for the first time since entering this warehouse, genuine surprise crossed his face. You built a counter network, he said quietly. I had a lot of time being dead. The implications settled over Shaw like falling snow. This wasn't just a crew trying to survive. This was an organization, a network that could challenge Cipher's infrastructure using methods she'd never anticipated. Low-tech human intelligence defeating high-tech surveillance. It was brilliant. Here's your choice, Dom said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Work with us to stop Cipher, or we leave you here for Hobbs to collect. Either way, the game's over. Shaw considered. Working for Cipher had been profitable but unfulfilling. Executing operations for a ghost, never seeing the bigger picture, Always being one piece on a board he couldn't see, working with the Toretto crew would be dangerous. Probably lethal. Almost certainly ending in either victory or death with no middle ground. But it would be his choice, his mission, his chance to operate as a soldier again rather than a mercenary. He looked at Han, the man he'd tried to kill, who'd turned survival into supremacy. Looked at Dom, the legend who held loyalty as sacred. Looked at Brian, the investigator who'd found patterns in chaos. These were men who fought for something beyond money, beyond orders. They fought for family. "You're a lot more dangerous alive than dead," Shaw said to Han. "That's the idea." Shaw stood slowly, extending his hand. "What do you need?" Dom didn't take the hand. "Not yet. Everything you know about Cipher's operations. Locations, personnel, timelines. And proof you're not running a double game. I can give you that." Shaw pulled an encrypted satellite phone from his jacket. "But understand this. Once I betray Cipher, there's no going back. She'll come for me with everything she has. Then you'll understand what we've been dealing with," Brian said. Shaw nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He began transferring files to Tage's laptop. Encrypted archives, operational data, everything he had on Cipher's network. The encrypted files downloaded slowly, each megabyte representing another piece of Cipher's operational puzzle. Tej watched the progress bar with the intensity of a man defusing a bomb. In a way, he was. This data could either save them or lead them into a trap. Shaw stood apart from the crew, isolated by his recent allegiance shift. He wasn't family, wasn't trusted. But he was necessary, and in this world, necessity created strange partnerships. "These are military-grade black site files," Tej said, his voice carrying both admiration and concern. "Shaw, if Cipher finds out you transferred these, she'll kill me," Shaw finished. "Which is why I'm going all in. Half measures don't work with Cipher." Brian studied Shaw with investigator's eyes, looking for tells, for deception, for any sign this was an elaborate counter-operation. But Shaw's body language read as genuine. A soldier who'd made a decision and would see it through. Dom stood with arms crossed, watchful. He didn't trust Shaw, might never trust him. But he understood the mathematics of warfare. Sometimes you needed the devil you knew to fight the devil you didn't. The download completed. Tej opened the archive, beginning to catalog files by operation name, date, location. It was a treasure trove of intelligence that would take weeks to fully analyze. But one file caught Han's attention immediately. Operation Nightshade, Spain Extraction. His hand trembled as he clicked it open. The file was extensive. Operational logs, personnel rosters, communication transcripts, and buried within it, video footage. Han's breath caught. Spain runway, 15 months ago. The footage played on the main monitor. Everyone in the warehouse turned to watch. They'd all lived this moment. The massive cargo plane, the extended runway chase, Giselle hanging from the car, sacrificing herself so Han could survive. The moment that had shattered Han and sent him spiraling into Tokyo. But this footage showed a different angle. A camera hidden in the plane's cargo bay, operated by someone who wasn't part of Owen Shaw's crew. Someone documenting everything for another purpose. The footage showed Giselle falling, showed her hitting the tarmac with devastating force. The crew had believed that impact killed her instantly. No one could survive that kind of fall. But the camera kept recording after Dom and the others left the scene. A black helicopter descended from cloud cover. Men in Spanish emergency service uniforms, except their movements were too tactical, too military. They loaded Giselle's unconscious body onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency. "Asset recovered," a voice said over the radio. British accent. Cold. "Subject is alive but critical. Initiating extraction protocol." The helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the Spanish sky with its precious cargo. The footage ended. The warehouse was absolutely silent. Han stared at the screen where Giselle's image had frozen. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. 15 months. 15 months of believing he'd gotten her killed. 15 months of grief and guilt and self-imposed exile. 15 months of a lie. She was alive, Han whispered, and his voice cracked on the last word. Brian moved closer, his hand on Han's shoulder. "Han, Giselle survived the fall. Cipher took her." Han turned to face the crew, and they saw something in his eyes they'd never seen before. Raw, unfiltered emotion breaking through his characteristic calm. She's been alive this whole time. Dom's expression darkened. Why would Cipher want Giselle? Tej was already scanning through associated files, his analytical mind working through the implications. According to this, Giselle had Mossad-level intelligence on Middle Eastern networks. Cipher needed that information to access secure facilities. Arms dealers, intelligence networks, military installations. Giselle wasn't just muscle, Shaw confirmed quietly. She was intelligence gold. Her Mossad background gave her access to networks that even Cipher couldn't crack. Taking her alive was always the primary objective. Han's mind raced through implications, timelines, possibilities. The Spain operation. Owen Shaw wasn't just trying to complete his mission. He was extracting Giselle for Cipher. She played both sides, Brian said, his investigator's mind putting pieces together. Used Owen to build his operation and grab Giselle. When we stopped Owen, she still got what she wanted, Giselle and the operational data. The revelation hit the crew like a physical blow. They'd celebrated their victory in Spain, not realizing Cipher had turned their win into her advantage. Where is she now? Han asked Shaw, his voice dangerously quiet. Shaw shook his head. That's above my clearance. But if Cipher kept her alive for 15 months, she's valuable. Probably in one of the deep facilities, places that don't officially exist. Then we find them all, Han said with absolute finality. Han needed air. Needed to think. Needed to process the impossible truth that everything he'd believed about the worst day of his life was wrong. He stepped outside into London's pre-dawn gray. Rain had stopped, leaving the city wet and glistening. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, Giselle was alive. Dom followed, knowing Han needed someone but wouldn't ask for company. They stood in silence for a long moment. Two men who'd both lost people they loved. Two men who understood grief as intimately as breathing. For 15 months I thought I got her killed, Han said finally. That my decisions, my mission to Tokyo led to her death. It wasn't your fault. I know. Han's voice was hollow. But I spent 15 months carrying it anyway. Became a ghost because I couldn't face being the man who got Giselle killed. And now? Han turned to face Dom, and his expression had transformed. The grief was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, something purpose-driven. Now I find her. That's not optional anymore, Dom. This whole thing, stopping Cipher, preventing her operations, it's not just about protecting the world. It's personal. Dom nodded slowly. Then we make it personal for all of us. Because that's what family meant. Your pain became everyone's pain. Your mission became everyone's mission. There was no such thing as fighting alone when you had family. We'll find her, Dom promised. Whatever it takes, wherever she is, we bring her home. Han allowed himself the first real hope he'd felt in 15 months. Not the cautious optimism of survival, but the burning certainty of purpose. Giselle was alive, and he was going to move heaven and earth to get her back. The crew had reassembled around the tactical table, the initial shock wearing off as operational planning took over. This was what they did, transformed grief into action, pain into purpose. Shaw stood at the head of the table providing intelligence on Cipher's operations. She's planning multiple operations simultaneously, Shaw began, pulling up schematics on Tej's laptop. Singapore, Buenos Aires, Berlin, Hong Kong. Each target gives her a piece of what she needs. Surveillance infrastructure, financial networks, operational data. Brian studied the facility layouts. She's building something. All these pieces connect. A global control network, Shaw confirmed. Once integrated, she'll have surveillance capabilities that rival nation-states. Financial networks to fund operations indefinitely, and the data to blackmail anyone who gets in her way. How do we stop operations happening in 4 cities simultaneously? Roman asked. Han's voice was cold, calculated, absolutely focused. We don't stop them all. We hit the 3 that matter most and force her to choose which one to save. Which 3? Dom asked. Han pulled up new intelligence, cross-referencing Shaw's data with his own ghost network findings. Singapore, her Asian server farm, contains operational data on everything she's done for the past 5 years. Buenos Aires financial hub. Every dollar she's moved, every shell company, every account, and Hong Kong, her Asian Operational Command. If intelligence exists on where they're keeping Gazelle, that's where we'll find it. Berlin's a distraction, Han said. She wants us to focus there because it's the most obvious target. But the real value is in the data centers. Tej nodded agreement. Makes sense. Hardware you can replace, data and intelligence, that's irreplaceable. So we split into 3 teams, Dom decided. Hit all 3 simultaneously. She can't defend everywhere. Shaw leaned forward, studying the map. She'll have to choose which asset to protect, which one to let fall. And while she's making that choice, Han said, his voice carrying an edge that made even Shaw pause, we're taking everything she's trying to protect. Brian pulled up detailed schematics for each target, his analytical mind already working through approaches. Singapore's the most straightforward, he said. Data center disguised as legitimate tech facility. Light security, heavy encryption. Tej and I can handle the digital infiltration. Buenos Aires is harder, Shaw added. Physical security, armed guards. Old school banking with modern protection. You'll need muscle and an exit strategy. Roman grinned. Muscle? That's my specialty. You're also going to need precision driving, Han observed. Buenos Aires streets are narrow. European-style drift techniques will give you an advantage in pursuit situations. Drift techniques. Right. The spinny car stuff. The spinny car stuff that might save your life, Han said. Dom looked at Han, understanding passing between them. How long to train him? 3 days if I push him. He's got the instincts, just needs the skills. Then we've got 3 days, Dom said with finality. Brian and Tej prep for Singapore. Shaw, you coordinate with Roman for Buenos Aires. You know the target. He knows the streets. Han, you train Roman, and I'll work on Hong Kong logistics. Everyone nodded. The plan was ambitious, dangerous, and required perfect execution across 3 continents, which meant it was exactly their kind of operation. Roman Pierce stood beside the orange RX-7, staring at it like it was a mathematical equation he couldn't solve. Which, in a way, it was. You want me to drift, Roman said, disbelief evident in his voice. In that, Han leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, expression patient. I want you to understand drifting. There's a difference. Man, I drive muscle, American power, straight lines and quarter miles. This Tokyo spinning stuff? That's not my style. That's why you need to learn it, Han said calmly. Cipher's operations use precision driving, tactical maneuvers. If you're going into Buenos Aires, you need to understand how to use a car as more than just acceleration. Tej watched from his laptop setup, grinning. This is gonna be good. Shut up, Tej. Han walked to the RX-7, running his hand along the Veilside kit with the reverence of someone touching something sacred. A drift isn't about losing control. It's about managing controlled chaos. You're making the car do something physics says shouldn't work, but you're doing it with precision. Physics says it shouldn't work, Roman repeated, and yet you want me to do it. Because impossible is just another word for difficult, Han said. And we do difficult things. He gestured to a practice course set up in the warehouse district, a maze of shipping containers arranged to simulate tight urban corners, the kind they'd encounter in real operations. Basic principles, Han began, slipping into teaching mode. Weight transfer, steering angle, throttle control. You're not fighting the car, you're having a conversation with it. I don't speak Japanese car. Then it's time you learned. The first attempt, Roman climbed into the RX-7's driver's seat, immediately uncomfortable. The car was small, tight, built for precision rather than comfort. Everything felt wrong compared to his usual American muscle. Han stood outside, arms crossed, watching with that inscrutable expression that gave away nothing. Start with a basic corner, Han instructed. Approach at 30 miles per hour. Downshift. Pull the handbrake. Counter steer. That's it? That's everything. Roman accelerated toward the first container corner, building speed. At the last moment, he yanked the handbrake. The RX-7 spun, but not elegantly, not controlled. It rotated too far, overcorrected, and stalled out facing the wrong direction entirely. Tej's laughter echoed through the warehouse. Roman climbed out, frustrated. See? This isn't me. No, Han agreed. That wasn't you. That was you trying to muscle the car instead of understanding it. What's the difference? Han walked to the RX-7, his movements deliberate. When you drive muscle, you're commanding power. When you drift, you're negotiating with physics. Come here. He positioned Roman beside the car. Feel the weight distribution. The RX-7 is rear-wheel drive, front engine. That means the weight shifts backward during acceleration, forward during braking. The drift is you using that shift to rotate the car. Roman listened, his competitive nature overriding his frustration. He hated failing, hated being the one who couldn't do something the others could. Let me show you, Han said. Han climbed into the RX-7 and took it through the course with the fluid grace of a dancer performing a routine they'd perfected over years. The car approached the first corner at exactly 30 miles per hour. Han downshifted, the rotary engine note changing. He pulled the handbrake and simultaneously countersteered. The RX-7 rotated smoothly, rear end swinging wide while the front tracked the corner apex. Smoke poured from the tires. The car held the drift through the entire turn, then straightened with mechanical precision. Second corner. Same technique, but Han added throttle mid-drift, extending the slide. The car danced sideways, completely sideways, yet somehow still moving in the right direction. Third corner. Han executed a clutch kick drift, using the sudden power delivery to break traction intentionally. The car snapped sideways, held the angle, then transitioned into the next turn without straightening. It was poetry. It was physics-made art. It was everything Roman's straight-line philosophy wasn't. Han brought the RX-7 back to the starting position and climbed out, not even breathing hard. That's a drift, he said simply. Roman stared. How long did it take you to learn that? Years. But you don't need to master it, you just need to understand it enough to survive. What's the difference? Han's expression was serious. Mastery is about perfection, survival is about options. I'm not teaching you to drift race. I'm teaching you to use drifting as a tactical maneuver when straight-line driving gets you killed. That Roman understood. He'd been in enough high-speed chases to know that sometimes the conventional approach got you caught or killed. All right, Roman said, renewed determination evident. Show me again. Slower this time. The breakdown for the next 3 hours, Han broke down every element of drifting into its component parts. Weight transfer. The car wants to go straight. You're using weight shift to overcome that natural tendency. Steering input, too much and you spin. Too little and you understeer. It's a constant conversation. Throttle control. This is where power meets finesse. You're balancing on the edge between grip and slip. Roman absorbed it like someone learning a new language. It was frustrating, technical, completely foreign to his usual driving style. But slowly, incrementally, he started to understand. His second attempt was better. The car actually drifted instead of just spinning. His third attempt held the drift for a full second before he lost it. His fifth attempt made it through an entire corner. By the 10th attempt, Roman was grinning. I think I'm getting it. You're getting the basics, Han corrected. But basics are all you need for survival. Tage had been watching the entire time, impressed despite himself. Roman's actually learning something. Mark the calendar. I learn stuff all the time. Name one thing you learned this year. That Tej is an asshole. You knew that already. Despite the banter, there was real progress happening. Roman was expanding his skill set, learning techniques that could save his life in Buenos Aires. One more run, Han said, but this time, I'm going to make it difficult. How difficult? Han pulled out a paintball gun. I'm going to shoot at you. You have to use drifting to dodge. You're gonna what? Tactical scenario, Han explained. In Buenos Aires, you might face pursuit, might face gunfire. You need to learn how drifting creates unpredictable movement that's hard to target. Tej perked up. Can I help shoot at Roman? Absolutely not. Roman, you know I'm the best shot here, which is why you're not shooting at me. Han loaded the paintball gun with high-velocity rounds. Not lethal, but they'd hurt. Start driving, I'll give you a 5-second head start. Roman climbed into the RX-7, adrenaline spiking. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of training that would keep him alive. He started the course, building speed. Behind him, Han took aim. The first paintball round whistled past Roman's window. He jerked the wheel instinctively, nearly losing control. "Don't react," Han called out. "Anticipate. Use the drift to change your position unpredictably." Second round. This time, Roman initiated a drift, the car swinging sideways. The paintball missed by feet instead of inches. Better. Third round. Roman clutch kicked into a drift, held it through the corner while simultaneously changing his line. The paintball hit the rear quarter panel instead of the driver's door. "Good. You're learning." Roman completed the course with paint splattered across the RX-7's body, but none of it had hit the driver's position. He'd used drifting defensively, creating movement patterns that made him a harder target. He climbed out, adrenaline pumping, grinning like he'd just won a championship. That was insane. "That was necessary," Han corrected, but he was smiling too, the rare expression that meant approval. Dom had been watching from the garage entrance, leaning against the doorframe. He'd seen the entire training session, seen Roman transform from skeptical to competent. "The teacher has become a master," Dom said, nodding at Han. Han shrugged, characteristically modest. "Just passing on what I learned." "From me?" Dom asked. "From everyone. You taught me loyalty. Brian taught me patience. Giselle taught me—" Han paused. "Giselle taught me that family means protecting each other no matter the cost." The mention of Giselle's name brought the weight of their mission back into focus. The training, the preparation, all of it led to one goal: bringing her home. The crew assembled in the war room one final time before splitting across 3 continents. The tactical maps were finalized, the equipment was prepped, the teams were ready. Brian had Singapore covered, a server farm raid that required precision and technical expertise. His FBI background made him perfect for infiltration and data extraction. Shaw would accompany Roman to Buenos Aires, a financial hub that required muscle and intimidation more than finesse. The unlikely partnership had developed into grudging respect over the past week. And Dom and Han would take Hong Kong, the big one, Cipher's Asian Operational Command, the place where, if intelligence existed on Giselle's location, they would find it. The operations happened simultaneously, Dom explained, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We hit all 3 targets at once. Cipher can't defend everywhere. She'll have to choose," Brian added. "Which asset to protect, which one to let fall. And while she's making that choice," Han said, his voice cold and focused, "we're gathering everything she's trying to protect." Tej pulled up the technical specifications for each target. Singapore's the easiest. Digital infiltration, grab the data, get out. Buenos Aires is harder. Physical security, armed guards, but Roman's new drift skills should help with the escape. "And Hong Kong?" Roman asked. Han and Dom exchanged a look. "Hong Kong is personal," Dom said simply. Everyone understood. This wasn't just another raid. This was about finding Giselle, about bringing family home, about ending Cipher's ability to hurt them. "We leave in 6 hours, Dom announced. "Everyone check your gear, review your routes, get your head right. This is the biggest operation we've ever attempted. And the most dangerous," Shaw added. His professional assessment carried weight. He'd run operations across 3 continents, knew what they were facing. "Good," Dom rumbled. "Dangerous means it matters." The next 6 hours became a study in professional preparation. Brian and Tej reviewed Singapore's server farm schematics, planning digital intrusion routes and physical escape paths. Their partnership had evolved into something seamless, Brian's tactical mind complementing Tej's technical genius. "I've got malware that'll copy their entire database in under 10 minutes, Tej said, showing Brian the custom code he'd written. "And if their firewalls detect it? Then we go to plan B. I fry their security systems and we grab the physical drives." I like how plan B involves destroying millions of dollars in equipment. Hey, they shouldn't have messed with family. Roman and Shaw practiced high-speed extraction maneuvers in Buenos Aires-style urban environments. The former rivals had found common ground in professionalism. Shaw respected Roman's courage. Roman respected Shaw's competence. "The financial district has narrow streets," Shaw explained, walking Roman through satellite imagery, European architecture, tight corners. "Your drift training will be essential." "Han taught me good," Roman said with confidence. "Han taught you adequately," Shaw corrected. "Don't get cocky." "I'm always cocky." Shaw allowed himself a slight smile. The American was growing on him. Dom and Han sat together, reviewing Hong Kong intelligence in silence. Two men who'd both lost people they loved. Two men about to walk into the most dangerous situation of their lives. "You ready for this?" Dom asked finally. Han's expression was unreadable. "I've been ready for 15 months. Just didn't know what I was ready for until now. We're going to find her." "I know." Han's voice carried absolute certainty, because the alternative isn't acceptable. Dom nodded slowly. That was the Toretto way. Decide what matters. Commit completely. Accept no alternative. "Whatever we find in Hong Kong," Dom said, "whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Han looked at Dom, gratitude evident in his eyes. "I know. That's what family means." Ghost Garage, final moments. The crew stood together one last time before splitting across 3 continents. The orange RX-7 gleamed under the garage lights, ready for Hong Kong. Shaw's Mercedes sat beside it, prepped for Buenos Aires. Brian's tactical gear was already packed for Singapore. "For Giselle," Han said quietly. "For family," Dom added. "For everyone who thought they could break us," Brian finished. They placed hands in the center one more time. The circle of brotherhood. Then they split. Brian and Tej headed for Narita Airport, Singapore bound. Roman and Shaw took a different flight to South America. Dom and Han would leave last, giving them time to coordinate the simultaneous strikes. As the garage emptied, Han stood alone with the RX-7. He ran his hand along the Veilside kit, thinking about everything this car represented. Survival, evolution, becoming something more than what the world expected. 15 months as a ghost, Han whispered to the empty garage. Time to finish this. He climbed into the driver's seat, fired the rotary engine, and drove into Tokyo's night. The Ghost King was going to war, and heaven help anyone who stood between him and family. 3 days later, Singapore, 2 a.m. local time. Brian O'Connor stood across the street from the server farm, dressed in an expensive suit that marked him as a tech executive. The building rose 15 floors into Singapore's humid night, its facade all chrome and glass. "Tej, you ready?" Brian spoke into his earpiece. Half a mile away, Tej sat in a van filled with computer equipment. "Born ready. Just get me within range of their network." Brian adjusted his tie. Expensive, professional, the kind worn by consultants doing legitimate business. His false credentials identified him as a representative for an American firm looking to expand into Asian markets. The credentials were perfect, because Tej had created the entire company 2 weeks ago, complete with website, business filings, and enough digital footprint to survive scrutiny. "Going in," Brian said. He walked through the front door like he belonged there. Buenos Aires, 11 p.m. local time. Roman and Shaw sat in a car 3 blocks from the financial district, watching security patterns. The building housed Cipher's South American money laundering operations. Old-fashioned banking with modern protection. "You remember the plan?" Shaw asked. Roman checked his weapon, grinning. "I go in loud, you grab the files, we drift our way out of trouble." That's actually accurate. "I pay attention sometimes." Shaw had to admit, Roman had developed as an operator over the past week. The loud, cocky street racer had become someone who could be relied on in a firefight. 3 minutes, Shaw said, checking his watch. Roman cracked his knuckles. "Let's make Han proud with some tactical drifting." Hong Kong, 3 a.m. local time. Dom and Han stood on a rooftop in Kowloon, watching the International Commerce Center pierce the sky like a glass needle. Somewhere on the 100th floor was Cipher's Asian Operational Command. And somewhere in her files was information on where they were keeping Giselle. "Last chance to back out," Dom said. Han's expression was absolute determination. Not a chance. They'd shipped the RX-7 ahead using Ghost Network connections. The orange drift machine sat in a warehouse below them, prepped and ready for what came next. "Then let's bring her home," Dom said. Han nodded once, pulled out his radio. "All teams, this is Ghost. You are go for operations. Execute simultaneously in 3, 2, 1, execute." Across 3 continents, the Toretto crew went to war, and Cipher's empire began to burn. The lobby was all chrome and glass, designed to impress clients. Security sat behind a desk that probably cost more than most cars. Brian approached with confident casualness. "Brian Walker, Tech Consult Global. I have a 10 p.m. appointment with Mr. Chen regarding the expansion proposal. The security guard checked his computer, found the appointment because Tej had hacked their system and inserted it 3 days ago. 15th floor, the guard said. You'll need to check in with... Brian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, feigning annoyance. Excuse me. Client emergency. He stepped aside, taking the fake call, while his other hand slipped a device from his pocket. The USB transmitter was smaller than a thumb drive, designed by Tej to broadcast Wi-Fi in a way that mimicked legitimate building infrastructure. Brian accidentally dropped his briefcase near a decorative plant. While retrieving it, he planted the transmitter in the soil. Sorry about that, he said, returning to the desk. Should be quick. Can you let Mr. Chen know I'll be slightly delayed? I'm in their network, Tej reported, fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously. Security protocols are... Wow, this is serious encryption. Can you break it? Please. I'm insulted you even asked. Tej's screens filled with cascading code. But it'll take 10 minutes. You need to keep them distracted. Copy that. Brian's job was to be seen, to be remembered, to provide a legitimate reason for being in the building. He met with the fictional Mr. Chen, actually another Ghost Network asset who'd been inserted into the company weeks ago. They discussed nonsense, made small talk, acted like a boring business meeting while Tej stripped Cipher's server farm naked digitally. Got it, Tej said finally. Downloading now. Holy, Brian, this is everything. Operational logs, financial records, personnel files, black site locations. Brian's pulse quickened. Giselle? Searching? Yes. She's listed. Status. Asset. Active. Location? Classified under high security designation. Antarctica? There's a facility. Coordinates are encrypted, but I'm copying everything. We'll decrypt off-site. The download progress bar crept forward. 57%. 62%. An alarm sounded. Not a security alarm. A network intrusion alert. Tej? They detected me. Probably have automated defenses. Brian, you need to leave now. Brian stood calmly, shaking hands with the fake Mr. Chen. Thank you for your time. I'll have my people send over the proposal revisions. He walked to the elevator. Casual, unhurried. Got in. Pressed the lobby button. The elevator descended. 14, 13, 12. Security would be reviewing footage, trying to identify the intrusion point. They'd see him eventually, see the transmitter. But by then, he'd be gone. Download complete, Tej reported. I've got everything. Get out. The elevator doors opened on the lobby. Brian walked out nodding to security and exited through the front door. 3 blocks away, he climbed into Tej's van. Go, Brian said. Tej drove, keeping to the speed limit, blending into Singapore's late-night traffic. Behind them, the server farm's security team was just realizing they'd been robbed. That was too easy, Tej said. Easy? Brian raised an eyebrow. You just broke military-grade encryption in 10 minutes. Okay, easy for us. They drove in silence for a moment, processing what they'd found. The files contained references to multiple secure facilities. If they could decrypt the location data... We got what we came for, Brian said. Now we get it to Han. Roman Pierce and Deckard Shaw made an unlikely pair, but their mission required both muscle and precision. The financial hub was Cipher's money laundering operation for South America. Not servers. Not digital. Old-fashioned banking with modern security. You ready for this? Shaw asked. Roman checked his weapon, a confident grin on his face. Man, I was born ready. Plus I got drift skills now. Han taught me good. Han taught you adequately, Shaw corrected. Don't get cocky. I'm always cocky. Their approach was direct. No finesse, no infiltration. Just 2 very dangerous men walking into a building full of people who thought security made them safe. Shaw used C4 on the vault door, small charges precisely placed that would breach without destroying contents. The explosion was controlled, professional. Inside, Cipher's financial records sat in file cabinets. Old-school paper trails that couldn't be hacked remotely. You grab files, I'll handle security, Ronan said. Since when do you handle security? Since Han taught me to drift and I realized I'm actually kinda good at this tactical stuff. Shaw had to admit, Roman had grown as an operator. The loud, cocky street racer had developed into someone who could be relied on in a firefight. They worked quickly. Shaw photographed documents with a high-resolution camera while Roman covered the door. When security finally responded, alarms blared throughout the building. Armed guards converged on the vault from 3 directions. "Time to go," Roman shouted. They fought their way through the corridor, Shaw's military training complementing Roman's street-born instincts. But there were too many guards, and more were coming. They burst through the lobby, sprinting for their extraction vehicle, a borrowed Argentine muscle car that Roman had insisted on, despite Shaw's preference for something more tactical. "Get us out of here," Shaw commanded, diving into the passenger seat. Roman fired the engine and punched the throttle. The car launched forward with American V8 Fury, tires smoking. 3 security vehicles pulled out to pursue. Black SUVs with armed guards leaning out windows. "This is where the drift training pays off," Roman announced. Buenos Aires streets were narrow, European in design, with tight corners that would normally require slowing down. But Roman had spent 3 days learning to use physics as a weapon. The first corner came fast. Roman downshifted, yanked the handbrake, counter-steered. The car rotated sideways, sliding through the intersection while maintaining forward momentum. The pursuing SUVs tried to follow but couldn't match the maneuver. They had to brake hard, losing precious seconds. "Yes!" Roman shouted. "Did you see that? Less celebrating, more driving," Shaw barked, though there was grudging approval in his voice. Second corner. Roman clutch-kicked into the drift, the car snapping sideways with precision Han would have been proud of. He held the slide through the entire turn, then straightened and accelerated. The SUVs were falling behind. Their drivers were good, but they were conventional. Roman was using unconventional tactics. "This is amazing," Roman grinned. Han was right. Drifting is tactical. A third SUV appeared ahead, trying to block their escape route. Roman didn't slow down, didn't brake, just initiated another drift that rotated the car 180 degrees, allowing him to drive backward through the gap while facing forward. "That's impossible," one of the guards shouted as they screamed past. "Tell that to physics," Roman laughed. They disappeared into Buenos Aires' maze of streets. The security vehicles lost blocks behind. Shaw was reviewing the photographed documents on his camera, calmly despite the high-speed chase they'd just escaped. "We got everything," Shaw confirmed. "Financial records, shell companies, money transfers. This is enough to trace every dollar Cipher's moved in the past 5 years. And there's a pattern. Large transfers to a location identified only as Secure Facility Alpha. Everyone's finding the same thing," Roman observed, executing one more drift around a corner just because he could. "Because that's where she's keeping whatever she values most." Roman drifted around a final corner and straightened out onto a main avenue. "Then that's where we're going next." Dom and Han stood at the base of the 100th tallest building in the world, staring up at a structure that seemed to pierce the clouds. Somewhere up there, on the 100th floor, was Cipher's Asian Operational Command. "Brian and Tej got server data from Singapore," Dom reported via encrypted radio. "Roman and Shaw got financial records from Buenos Aires. Both point to a secure facility." "Then we need to confirm it here," Han said, "and get exact coordinates." They weren't going through the front door. They weren't going through any conventional entrance. They were going to drift their way to the top. The plan was insane, which meant it was probably the only plan that would work. The International Commerce Center had a parking structure that spiraled up through the first 20 floors. After that, it was elevators and restricted access. But Han had studied the building's architecture, had found a weakness, a cargo elevator that ran from the parking structure to the 100th floor, designed for moving large equipment during construction. It was supposedly decommissioned, but supposedly wasn't the same as actually. Dom and Han drove the RX-7 into the parking structure, fought their way past private security with a combination of Dom's intimidation and Han's precision driving, and reached the cargo elevator shaft. "You're sure about this?" Dom asked, staring at the shaft that dropped into darkness below and climbed into darkness above. "No," Han admitted. "But it's the only way up." They activated the cargo elevator remotely, Tej handiwork from Singapore, giving them access to building systems. The massive platform descended with grinding mechanical sounds. They drove the RX-7 onto it and began the slowest, most vulnerable ascent of their lives. The elevator climbed, floor by floor, 20, 30, 40. If they detect us, Dom began. Then we fight our way up the rest. Han finished. 50, 60, 70. The elevator continued its grinding ascent, carrying 2 men and an orange drift car toward a confrontation that had been building for 15 months. 80, 90. Almost there. The elevator reached the 100th floor and stopped with a metallic clang. Dom and Han exited the RX-7, weapons ready. The operational center was everything they'd expected. Wall-to-wall monitors, global surveillance feeds, analysts working at computer stations, and standing at the window, watching Hong Kong sprawl below, was a woman they'd never seen in person. Cipher. Except she wasn't there. It was a hologram, a projection designed to make her seem present when she was actually 3,000 miles away. "You made it," Cipher's voice said, and it carried amusement. "I'm impressed." Dom and Han fanned out, securing the room. The analysts didn't resist. These were tech workers, not soldiers. "Where is she?" Han demanded. "Giselle, where are you keeping her?" "Somewhere you'll never find," Cipher replied through the hologram. "Did you really think I'd keep that information here?" "We know about the secure facility," Dom said. For the first time, Cipher's hologram showed surprise. "Do you? That's unfortunate." Han moved to the main computer terminal, plugging in one of Tej's data extraction devices. "We're taking everything, every file, every record, every secret." "Take them," Cipher said. "They won't help you. The facility location is encrypted with algorithms that would take years to break, and even if you find it, the security will kill you long before you reach her." The data extraction began, progress bar crawling across the screen. Han's hands trembled as he worked. Somewhere in these files was information that would lead him to Giselle. He just had to find it. "This is over, Cipher," Dom said. "Your network is burning. We've hit Singapore, Buenos Aires, Hong Kong. We've blinded you across 3 continents. And yet I'm still here," Cipher observed. "Still watching, still planning. You've won tactical victories, Mr. Toretto. But the war? The war is just beginning." The download hit 100%. Han removed the device, slipping it into his pocket. They had what they came for. 3 operations, 3 successes, Cipher said, her hologram flickering. "But you should know. I've been planning for this. Your families, Mr. Toretto. Your loved ones. I know where they are. I know how to hurt you." Dom's expression darkened. "You come after my family, I'll burn your entire operation to ash." "You can try." The hologram smiled. "But remember, I've already taken one person you love. What's to stop me from taking more?" The hologram flickered and died. "She's bluffing," Dom said, though his voice carried uncertainty. "Maybe," Han replied. "But we need to move. Now!" They sprinted back to the cargo elevator, descended to the parking structure, and drove out before Hong Kong authorities arrived. They met with Sean at a safe house, consolidating all the intelligence they'd gathered. Singapore data, black site locations, including coordinates that matched a facility in Antarctica. Buenos Aires files, financial trails leading to the same Antarctic facility. Hong Kong records, operational protocols for what was designated Secure Facility Alpha Asset Management Program. It all pointed to one place, one facility where Cipher kept whatever she valued most, including Giselle. "We found her," Han said, staring at the coordinates. "After 15 months, we found her." Dom clasped his shoulder. "Then we go get her. Antarctica's not like Hong Kong or Berlin. It's isolated, hostile. Cipher will have her best security there. We've faced worse." "Have we?" Dom's expression was absolute certainty. "We've got something Cipher doesn't." "What's that?" "Family." Somewhere over the Atlantic, Cipher sat in her flying command center. Screens surrounded her. Global surveillance feeds, communication intercepts, financial data streams. Her empire visualized in real time. Then, one by one, the screens for Singapore, Buenos Aires, and Hong Kong went dark. Her expression remained cold, but her eyes betrayed fury. Someone had just destroyed months of work, had struck at the heart of her network with surgical precision. "Find out who did this," she ordered her team, "and bring me everything on the Toretto crew." "Ma'am," an operative reported, Our assets have been tracking their movements. 3 teams, 3 cities, perfect coordination. Cipher's fingers drummed on her armrest, the only outward sign of agitation. Then it's time to remind them what happens when you challenge me. Activate Antarctic security protocols. Maximum alert. No one gets in or out. Ma'am, are you certain? That will expose. Do it. The operative nodded and began making calls. Cipher turned back to her screens, her mind working through possibilities. Someone had built a network that rivaled her own. Someone had survived when they should have died. Someone was challenging her dominance. She should be concerned. Instead, she smiled. Finally, an opponent worth destroying. The crew reassembled in Tokyo, each team successful, each one carrying pieces of the puzzle. Brian and Tej brought server data from Singapore. Roman and Shaw brought financial records from Buenos Aires. Han and Dom brought operational protocols from Hong Kong. Together, the intelligence painted a complete picture. Cipher had a facility in Antarctica. Coordinates 77 degrees 51 S, 166 degrees 40 E. Deep in the Antarctic interior, disguised as a research station, heavily fortified, designed to withstand assault. And there, according to every piece of intelligence they'd gathered, was where Cipher kept her most valuable assets, including Gazelle Yashar. How do we get there? Roman asked. It's Antarctica. You can't just drive there. Hobbs, Don said. He owes us, and he has access to military transport. Brian was already on his laptop, pulling up satellite imagery of the coordinates. The facility's massive. This isn't a small operation. Cipher's been building this for years. Then we bring everything we have, Han said, his voice carrying an edge that made even Shaw pause. Every resource, every skill, every person willing to help. Tej pulled up the facility's apparent structure. She'll know we're coming. The simultaneous operations told her we figured it out. Good, Dom rumbled. Let her know. Let her prepare. We're coming anyway. This is a suicide mission. Even with military transport, even with the element of surprise, Antarctica is hostile terrain. The facility will be fortified. You'll be walking into a kill box. Then we change the box, Han said simply. Everyone looked at him. Cipher thinks in terms of defense, Han explained. Fortifications, security protocols, conventional assault prevention. But we don't do conventional. Han pulled up the satellite imagery again, studying it with the intensity of someone planning the most important operation of his life. We've spent 15 months preparing for this, building the Ghost Network, developing tactics, learning Cipher's methods. Now we use everything we've learned to do what she thinks is impossible. Which is? Shaw prompted. Han's expression was cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. We infiltrate her fortress, we rescue Giselle, and we destroy Cipher's ability to ever hurt family again. How? Dom asked. Han smiled. It was the smile of someone who'd spent 15 months becoming something more dangerous than Cipher could imagine. I've got a plan, but it requires trust. It requires coordination. And it requires every single person in this room being willing to risk everything. He looked around at the assembled crew. Family who'd crossed continents to bring him back from the dead. Brothers who'd fought impossible odds because that's what family did. Are you with me? Han asked. Dom placed his hand on the tactical table. Always. Brian followed. For family. Roman added his hand. For Giselle. Tej joined. For everyone who thought we couldn't. Shaw hesitated, then placed his hand on top. For redemption. The circle was complete. Then let's bring her home, Han said. And the Ghost King began explaining how to assault a fortress in the most hostile environment on Earth. 72 hours later, Antarctica. The sea. 130 transport plane descended through clouds that looked like the end of the world. Below, Antarctica stretched in an endless expanse of white, beautiful and lethal in equal measure. The crew sat in the cargo bay, each lost in their own thoughts. They'd assembled every resource, called in every favor, spent every dollar to make this mission possible. Hobbs had provided military transport, unofficially, with the understanding that if this went wrong, he'd never heard of them. The DSS agent had looked at the intelligence, looked at Dom, and simply said, "Bring your family home. The plane touched down on a makeshift ice runway 2 miles from Cipher's facility. Any closer and they'd trigger detection systems. Dom, Brian, Han, Roman, Tej, and Shaw stepped out into temperatures that immediately cut through their cold weather gear. "This is insane," Roman said, teeth already chattering. "This is necessary," Han corrected. The facility sat in a valley between glaciers, a modern fortress disguised as a research station. From above, it looked legitimate. Up close, the military-grade security was obvious. "There," Tej said, pointing at schematics on a ruggedized tablet. "That's the main entrance. Thermal imaging shows it's heavily guarded." "Then we don't use the main entrance," Dom said. Brian studied the facility's structure. "There's a ventilation system designed to handle the extreme cold, big enough to access through." "That's an action movie cliché," Shaw observed. "Clichés become clichés because they work." They split into 2 teams. Dom, Han, and Brian would infiltrate through the ventilation system, reach the detention level where intelligence suggested Giselle was being held. Shaw, Roman, and Tej would create a diversion at the main entrance, drawing security away from the detention level. The diversion team had vehicles, specially modified for ice and snow. Roman had insisted on driving, saying Han's drift training should apply to ice as easily as asphalt. He was about to find out. Dom, Brian, and Han dropped into the facility through the ventilation system, exactly as Brian had predicted. They moved through corridors that felt more like a black site prison than a research station. Armed guards patrolled with military precision. These weren't rent-a-cops. These were Cipher's elite, former special forces from a dozen different countries, loyal only to money. Han moved like a ghost, using his Tokyo-developed stealth skills to bypass patrols. Dom and Brian followed, trusting his expertise. They reached the detention level. Behind reinforced doors, intelligence said Giselle was being held. Han's hand trembled as he reached for the door control. 15 months. 15 months of believing she was dead. 15 months of grief that had transformed him into the Ghost King. And now, on the other side of this door, was the truth. The door opened. Giselle Yashar sat in a cell that was clean, comfortable, and absolutely a prison. She looked older. 15 months of captivity had added lines around her eyes, a hardness to her expression that came from survival. But she was alive. She was alive. Han stepped into the cell, unable to speak. Couldn't find words for a moment this impossible. Giselle looked up, saw him, and her expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and joy in the space of a heartbeat. "Han?" Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "I'm here, but you died. I saw footage. Shibuya! The explosion. I survived. Like you survived Spain." Han crossed to her, his hands shaking as he touched her face, confirming she was real. "I thought I lost you. I thought I'd never see you again." They embraced, 15 months of separation collapsing into a single moment of reunion. Dom and Brian stood guard, giving them privacy while watching for security. "We need to move," Brian said finally. "Cipher knows we're here." "How?" Giselle asked. "Because this was too easy," a voice said from the corridor. They turned to find Cipher herself standing there. Not a hologram, not a projection, the actual woman, flanked by a dozen armed guards. She was younger than expected, attractive in a cold way, and her eyes carried the absolute confidence of someone who always stayed 3 steps ahead. "Did you really think I'd leave my most valuable asset unguarded?" Cipher asked. "I've been waiting for you to come. Wanted to see the famous Toretto crew in person before I destroyed you." Alarms blared throughout the facility. The diversion team, Shaw, Roman, and Tej, had triggered their attack at the main entrance. Roman executed a drift on ice, the car sliding sideways with precision that would have made Han proud. Guards scattered. Explosions rocked the entrance. "For Han!" Roman shouted, grinning like a maniac as he drove through the chaos. Inside, Dom faced Cipher with the intensity that had made him legendary. "You made a mistake," Dom said. "You came after family, and you made a mistake," Cipher countered. "You think rescuing one woman wins you the war, but I've been building towards something far bigger than you understand." "We don't care about your plans," Han said, his arm around Giselle. "We care about family." How touching. Cipher raised her hand. The guards opened fire. Dom grabbed a table, using it as a shield. Brian returned fire with precision. Han pulled Gazelle behind cover. The firefight was brutal. Close quarters, absolutely lethal. "Exit route," Brian called. They fought their way through corridors, Cipher's guards pursuing. The facility's alarm system created chaos, doors locking, security protocols activating, the entire structure becoming a maze designed to trap intruders. "Where's the exit?" Giselle asked. "We're making one," Dom growled. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, used it to smash through a window. Antarctic wind howled into the facility, bringing temperatures that could kill in minutes. "Jump!" Dom ordered. They leaped from the second floor into snow that cushioned their fall. The diversion team pulled up in modified vehicles. "Get in!" Shaw shouted. They piled into the vehicles as guards poured from the facility. The chase began. Cars racing across Antarctic ice, bullets flying, the frozen continent becoming a battlefield. Roman drove with everything Han had taught him. Drifting on ice was exactly like drifting on asphalt, except ice was more forgiving and more treacherous simultaneously. The car slid sideways, maintaining speed while changing direction. Cipher's pursuit vehicles tried to follow but couldn't match Roman's newly developed skills. "I'm doing it," Roman shouted. "I'm actually doing it." Less celebrating, more driving. Tage called from the passenger seat. Han drove the second vehicle with Giselle beside him, Dom in the back providing covering fire. The RX-7 wasn't here. Wrong vehicle for ice, but Han's skills transferred to any car. Cipher's forces pursued with overwhelming numbers, but the crew had something better than numbers. They had family. They had skills honed over years of impossible missions, and they had nothing to lose. The chase continued across the ice, vehicles weaving between glaciers, the landscape simultaneously breathtaking and deadly. Shaw used his military training to coordinate defensive patterns. Brian used his tactical awareness to predict pursuit routes. Tej used technology to jam Cipher's communications. And slowly, incrementally, they gained ground. Cipher watched her operation fall apart from a command vehicle, her expression growing colder by the second. "Deploy everything," she ordered. "I don't care about the cost. Stop them." "Ma'am, if we deploy the experimental vehicle, deploy it." A vehicle emerged from the facility that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. Experimental, military grade, built specifically for Antarctic warfare. It was fast, it was armed, and it was piloted by Cipher herself. "You want to race?" Cipher's voice came over hacked radio frequencies. "Let's race." The chase became something biblical, cars racing across a frozen continent, the experimental vehicle pursuing with weapons that could shred steel. Dom and Han coordinated their driving, weaving defensive patterns that protected the more vulnerable vehicles. "We need to split up," Brian suggested over the radio. "Divide her attention." "No," Dom said. "We stay together. That's how we win." "Then how do we stop her?" Han's voice came through, calm and absolutely focused. "We don't stop her." He'd spotted a glacier field ahead, massive ice formations that created a natural maze. If they could lure Cipher in and use superior driving skills to navigate while she couldn't. "Everyone follow my line exactly," Han ordered. "No deviation. Trust me." The crew formed a convoy, following Han into the glacier maze. The passages were narrow, treacherous, requiring precision driving that bordered on superhuman. Han drifted through turns that shouldn't be possible. The other drivers followed his line exactly, trusting years of expertise. Cipher pursued, her experimental vehicle powerful but less maneuverable, and slowly the trap closed. Han led them through a passage that narrowed to barely car width, executed a perfect 180-degree drift, and positioned his vehicle perpendicular to the passage. Cipher's vehicle couldn't fit, couldn't turn around in the narrow space, was trapped. Dom pulled alongside, looked Cipher in the eye through her window. "It's over," he said simply. Cipher stared at him, at the crew who defeated her through skill and loyalty and brotherhood. "You won this round," she said, "but I'll always find you, always hunt you. This never ends." "You're right," Dom agreed, "because we're family, and family never ends." He disabled her vehicle's weapons systems, took her communication equipment, and left her trapped in the ice maze. Authorities would find her, or she'd freeze. Dom didn't particularly care which. Family was safe. That's all that mattered. They made it back to the C-130, wounded but alive. Giselle sat beside Han, their hands intertwined, neither willing to let go. 15 months, Giselle whispered. I thought I'd die in that facility. 15 months I thought I'd lost you on that Spanish runway, Han replied. We both thought wrong. The plane lifted off, leaving Antarctica behind, leaving that chapter of their lives behind. But as they flew north, toward warmth and safety, Han realized something. He wasn't the Ghost King anymore, wasn't the isolated operative working from shadows. He was Han Seoul-Oh again, part of a family, connected to people who'd crossed a frozen continent to bring him home. Thank you, he said to Dom. Dom just nodded, because that's what family did. You didn't thank them for doing the impossible. You just did the impossible together. 2 weeks later, Los Angeles. The Toretto house looked exactly as it always had. A monument to family, to loyalty, to the simple truth that blood and brotherhood mattered more than anything else in this world. But today, it felt different. Complete in a way it hadn't been for 15 months. Giselle stood in the garage, running her hand along Dom's charger with the reverence of someone who'd been denied simple pleasures for too long. I missed this, she said. The smell of motor oil, the sound of engines, the feeling of being around people who understand that cars aren't just vehicles, they're family. Letty handed her a beer, smiling. You're back where you belong. Am I, though? Giselle's expression turned serious. 15 months is a long time. The world moved on. You all moved on. And I was frozen in that facility, unchanging. We didn't move on, Han said, entering the garage. We moved forward. There's a difference. He crossed to her, and the connection between them was immediate. Two people who'd been torn apart and forcibly reunited, still finding their rhythm again. I spent 15 months becoming someone else, Han continued. Became the Ghost King. Built an empire in Tokyo's underground. Learned to operate alone. And I thought that was who I'd be forever. But, family brought me back. Reminded me that being strong alone is nothing compared to being strong together. Dom emerged from the house. Inside were files, photographs, intelligence documents from their Antarctic operation. Cipher's in custody, Dom said, setting the box on the workbench. Authorities found her in the glacier maze, took her in. But we both know she won't stay locked up forever. That's what we do. We face threats, we protect family. Roman and Tej arrived next, arguing about something technical and completely irrelevant. Their banter was familiar, comforting, a constant in a world that changed too fast. Family meeting? Roman asked, seeing everyone assembled. Family meeting, Dom confirmed. They gathered in the backyard as the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that reminded Han of the RX-7's paint job. Dominic Toretto stood at the grill cooking enough food to feed a small army. This was his ritual, his meditation, his way of bringing everyone together. I want to say something, Dom announced, his voice cutting through conversation. Everyone quieted, giving him attention. We started as street racers, Dom began, stealing DVD players and running quarter miles. Then we became thieves. Then soldiers. Then something I'm not sure has a name. A family, Mia said quietly from the porch. Yeah, Dom agreed. A family that crosses continents to save each other. That faces impossible odds and wins because we refuse to accept alternatives. That brings people back from the dead because death isn't an acceptable outcome. He looked at Han and Giselle. 15 months ago, we lost two people we loved. Or so we thought. Turns out we're stubborn enough to refuse loss. We fought, we planned, we executed impossible operations across 3 continents, and we brought family home. Han raised his beer. To stubbornness, to family, the crew echoed. They drank, the moment heavy with significance. But Han wasn't done. Han's revelation. He walked to the table and placed 2 empty chairs at specific positions, one between him and Dom, one at the end, separate but visible. Everyone noticed but didn't ask, waiting for Han to explain. This chair, Han said, indicating the one between him and Dom, is for Giselle. She's back. She's home. And this family isn't complete without acknowledging what her absence cost us. Giselle's eyes welled with tears. She sat in the chair, surrounded by family. And this chair, Han continued, indicating the one at the end, is for Jesse. The name hit like a physical blow. Jesse, the first casualty. The kid who died before the crew really understood what they'd become. I never knew Jesse, Han said. Was before my time. But I learned about him from Dom, from Brian. And I realized something while I was the Ghost King, operating alone in Tokyo. He paused, choosing words carefully. Family isn't just the people physically present. It's everyone who's ever been part of our circle. Everyone who made us who we are. Jesse earned his place at this table. And even though he can't sit here, we remember. Dom's expression was granite, but his eyes betrayed emotion. Jesse would have liked you. I wish I'd known him. We all do. The empty chair remained throughout the meal, a silent acknowledgement that some absences were permanent, but memory gave them presence. As the evening progressed and conversation flowed, Giselle stood. I want to thank everyone, she began, her voice carrying strength that came from surviving impossible circumstances. When I fell from that plane in Spain, I thought my life was over. Cipher proved me wrong. It wasn't over. It was just paused. She looked at Han. For 15 months, I existed in a cell. They extracted intelligence from me, used my Mossad knowledge to access networks, treated me like an asset instead of a person. But I never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that somehow someone would find me. And you did. You crossed a frozen continent, faced Cipher's best security, risked everything. She raised her beer. I don't have words big enough to express what that means, so I'll just say this. I'm home, and I'm never leaving again. The crew raised their drinks in salute. To coming home, Brian said. To staying home, Letty added. To never letting go again, Han finished. As the party wound down and people started heading inside, Dom and Han stood together watching the sunset. You did good, Dom said. Building the Ghost Network, turning survival into supremacy. I learned from the best, Han replied. What happens to the network now? Tokyo's still operational. Sean's running things. The network stays, Han decided. Cipher's in custody, but there will be others. Other threats, other people who think they can hurt family. And we'll be ready, always. They stood in comfortable silence, two men who'd both lost people and fought to get them back. Two men who understood that family wasn't just blood, it was choice. The Ghost King is dead, Han said finally. But Han Seoul-Oh is alive, and that's exactly where I want to be. Good, Dom rumbled, because we've got barbecues to attend, races to run, a life to live. Sounds perfect. As night fell over Los Angeles, the Toretto house glowed with warmth and life. Inside, family laughed and argued and simply existed together in the way that made everything else worthwhile. Two empty chairs remained at the table, one for Jesse, who they'd never forgotten, one symbolic space for whoever came next because family always grew. Han Seoul-Oh had been a street racer, then a thief, then a ghost, then a king. But tonight, he was simply Han, part of a family that had proven love was stronger than death, loyalty was stronger than distance, and brotherhood was stronger than any enemy. The Ghost King's legacy wasn't an empire in Tokyo's underground. It was this family, this moment, this home. Late that night, after everyone had left, Han stood alone in the garage. The orange RX-7 sat in the corner, gleaming under fluorescent lights. He ran his hand along the Veilside kit one more time. This car had been his salvation, his weapon, his identity for 15 months of being dead. Thank you, he whispered to it. Giselle appeared in the doorway. Talking to the car? It's a conversation we've had before. She crossed to him, slipping under his arm. What happens now? Now, Han smiled. Now we live. We race. We build a life that doesn't involve constant warfare. You think that's possible? With you? Yeah, I think anything's possible. They stood together in the garage, two people who'd conquered death and distance and impossible odds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new missions. But tonight, they had what mattered. Family, home, each other. And in the end, that's all anyone really needed. 6 months later, Tokyo. The Tokyo Underground street race was legendary. Hundreds of cars, Thousands of spectators, the entire drift scene assembled for the biggest event of the year. Neon reflected off rain-slicked streets. The teriyaki boys thumped from sound systems. The air smelled of racing fuel and possibility. And at the starting line, in the orange RX-7 that had become mythology, sat Han Seoul-Oh. Beside him, in an identical car painted midnight blue, sat Giselle Yashar, 6 months since Antarctica, 6 months since the impossible rescue, 6 months of rebuilding a life that didn't involve constant warfare. They'd returned to Tokyo together, not to hide, not to operate from shadows, but to simply live in the city that had given Han purpose when he needed it most. Just like old times? Giselle asked, her voice carrying through the open window. Better, Han replied, because this time we both know what we're racing for. And what's that? The pure joy of it. No missions, no operations, just 2 people who love cars and each other. The starter, a woman in designer streetwear who'd been running these events for years, raised her arms. The engines roared in anticipation. Hundreds of spectators pressed against barriers, phones out recording what would become legend. The Ghost King had returned, and he'd brought a queen. The arms dropped. 2 RX-7s launched forward in perfect synchronization, drifting through Tokyo's neon maze like ghosts made flesh. Han and Giselle moved through the course like they'd been racing together for years. In a way, they had. Their connection transcended cars and drifting, rooted in something deeper than technique. First corner. Han initiated a clutch-kick drift, the orange RX-7 rotating with mechanical precision. Giselle matched him perfectly in the blue car, their vehicles moving in synchronized harmony. The crowd erupted. Second corner. Giselle took the lead, her lines slightly tighter, more aggressive. Han smiled, recognizing her Mossad training translating into driving. Calculated risk, precision execution, absolute confidence. He accelerated to match her, pulling alongside. They drifted through the next section side by side, 2 cars moving as one, smoke billowing from tires like twin dragons breathing fire. Third corner, the signature move, a tandem drift through Shibuya Crossing itself, the same intersection where Han had died 15 months ago, the same place where everything had changed. But tonight, there was no death, no deception, just 2 people reclaiming the streets that had once been their battlefield. They drifted through the intersection in perfect tandem, the crowd going absolutely wild. Phones captured the moment. The Ghost King and his queen returned from death to dance through Tokyo's heart. Later, back at the warehouse that had once been Han's operational center, the crew gathered. Not for missions, not for planning, just to exist together in the space between adventures. The Ghost Network still operated. Sean Boswell ran the day-to-day operations, coordinating street racers across Asia who fed intelligence on potential threats. But tonight wasn't about work. Tonight was about family. Dom and Letty had flown in from LA. Brian and Mia brought the kids. Jack toddling around the garage, completely fascinated by the orange RX-7. Roman and Tej argued about something technical, their banter as reliable as sunrise. Even Shaw was there, having earned his place through shared sacrifice in Antarctica. The former enemy had become something approaching family, not trusted completely, but respected absolutely. To the Ghost King, Roman announced, raising a beer. Who taught me that spinning cars sideways is actually tactical? To family, Dom corrected, his voice carrying that characteristic rumble. Who brought everyone home? They drank, the moment heavy with unspoken emotion. Han stood with Giselle, watching their assembled family. 15 months ago, he'd been alone in this garage, building an empire from grief. Now it was filled with the people who mattered most. You did it, Giselle said quietly. Built something that lasted. We did it, Han corrected. Every person here contributed. The Ghost Network wasn't just my creation. It was family taking care of family. Sean approached, tablet in hand. Boss, we've got reports from Berlin and Singapore. Everything's quiet. No Cipher activity detected. She's still in custody? Brian asked. Maximum security facility in the Swiss Alps. Sean confirmed. She's not getting out anytime soon. But she will eventually, Shaw observed. His professional assessment carried weight. He knew how these things worked. Women like Cipher don't stay locked up forever. Then we'll be ready when she comes back, Dom said with finality. Han nodded agreement. The Ghost Network isn't going anywhere. We built it to protect family. That mission doesn't end just because one threat is neutralized. So what's next? Roman asked. We just live normal lives? Have barbecues and raise kids and pretend we're not the crew that took down international terrorists? That's exactly what we do. Later, as the party continued inside, Han and Dom stood on the warehouse roof, looking out over Tokyo's glittering sprawl. You ever think about what we've become? Han asked. Every day, Dom replied. Started as thieves, became something else. Protectors, family. They stood in silence, watching the city breathe below them. Millions of lives moving through the neon, each one unaware of the small group of people who'd faced impossible odds to keep them safe. I spent 15 months as a ghost, Han said, built an empire, became the Ghost King, and I thought that was who I'd be forever, this isolated operator working from shadows. What changed? Giselle. Finding out she was alive gave me purpose beyond survival. And you coming to Tokyo reminded me that strength isn't about operating alone, it's about being strong together. Dom nodded slowly. The most dangerous thing we have isn't the cars or the skills or the network. What is it? Each other. Family willing to cross frozen continents, brothers who refuse to accept death as final. That's the weapon Cipher never understood. Han smiled. She thought killing me would break the family. Instead, it made us stronger. Made you stronger, Dom corrected. The Ghost King wasn't weakness. It was evolution. You became what you needed to be to survive. Then you became what you needed to be to win. And now? Now you get to be what you want to be. Han Seoul-Oh. Street racer. Drifter. Brother. Whatever makes you happy. Han looked at the orange RX-7 parked below, visible through the warehouse's open bay door. That car had been his salvation, his weapon, his identity. But it was just a car. A beautiful, perfectly engineered car, but still just a machine. The real power had always been the people. I want to race, Han said finally. Want to drift through Tokyo with Giselle. Want to have barbecues at your place. Want to teach Sean and the next generation. Want to live the life I thought I'd lost when she fell from that plane. Then that's what you do, Dom said. You've earned it. We've all earned it. They stood together, two men who'd built a family from street racing and impossible circumstances. Two men who understood that the true measure of strength wasn't how hard you could hit, but how many times you could get back up. And how many people would help you stand. Inside the garage, Giselle and Letty sat together, beers in hand, watching the crew interact with the easy familiarity of family. You doing okay? Letty asked. Really okay, I mean. Not the brave face version. Giselle considered the question. 15 months in that facility changed me. I won't pretend it didn't. There are nights I wake up thinking I'm still in that cell. Days when crowds feel too close, when I need to know where every exit is. That's normal. I went through something similar when I came back. How did you deal with it? Family, Letty said simply. Letting them help carry the weight. Understanding that strength isn't about handling everything alone. It's about trusting the people around you. Giselle watched Han across the garage, laughing at something Roman said. He built an empire while I was gone. Became the Ghost King. Part of me wonders if he needed that more than he needed me. He needed both, Letty said. Needed to become strong enough to find you. But he also needed you to give him a reason to come back from being the Ghost King. You saved each other. That's a nice way to look at it. It's the true way to look at it. Dom and I went through the same thing. He thought he lost me. I thought I lost myself. But family brought us both back. Giselle smiled. Family seems to be the answer to everything with this crew. Because it is, Letty said. Cars, drifting, heists, that's just what we do. Family is who we are. Brian found Han working on the RX-7, making minor adjustments that were probably unnecessary, but gave his hands something to do. You ever think about the trajectory? Brian asked, leaning against the workbench. What trajectory? Ours. Started with me going undercover to bust Dom's crew. Now I'm married to his sister, raising kids, and helping rescue people from Antarctic fortresses. That's a weird career path. Han smiled. Probably not what the FBI Academy prepared you for. Definitely not, but I wouldn't change it. Brian paused. You saved my life during that Azabu ambush. Never properly thanked you for that. Family doesn't need thanks. That drift rescue was something else. You've gotten even better since Tokyo Drift. Had 15 months to practice, Han said, and a very motivated reason to stay sharp. Giselle? Always Giselle. Brian watched Han work for a moment, seeing the peace that had settled over his brother. The restless energy that had driven the Ghost King was gone, replaced by something calmer. You're different now, Brian observed. Not worse or better, just different. 15 months of being dead changes you, Han said, but 6 months of being alive with Gazelle has changed me more. The Ghost King was what I needed to be to survive. Han Seoul-Oh is who I want to be to live. And the network? Stays operational. Sean's good at running it, but it's no longer my whole identity. Just something I built that serves a purpose. That's healthy. That's growth. They stood in comfortable silence, two men who'd been through impossible circumstances and come out the other side stronger. You know what I realized? Brian said finally. We keep getting pulled into these impossible situations. Cipher, Shaw, Owen before him. It never really ends. No, Han agreed. It doesn't. But that's okay, because we don't face it alone. Family. Always family. Roman found Sean working on the drift course, adjusting container positions for tomorrow's practice session. Kids got skills, Roman said, announcing his presence. Sean turned, grinning. Learned from the best. Han taught me everything. Got that drift training too. You got 3 days of training. I got 9 months. Quality over quantity, young blood. They laughed, the competitive banter natural and comfortable. Roman had grown fond of Sean over the past weeks, seeing in the young American driver echoes of his own journey. Can I ask you something? Sean said. What's it like, being part of the crew? The real crew, I mean. Not just the Tokyo operation. Roman considered. It's terrifying and amazing and frustrating and perfect all at once. You've got people who'll cross continents to save you, but who'll also call you out when you're being stupid. Sounds intense. It is. But it's also the best thing that ever happened to me. I was just a street racer from Barstow. Now I don't even know what I am. But I'm something more. Think I'll ever be part of it? The real family? Kid, you already are. You helped Han build the Ghost Network, coordinated the London operation, extracted Dom and Brian from that Azabu ambush. You've been part of the family since the moment you chose to help instead of walking away. Sean smiled, the validation meaning more than he'd expected. Thanks, man. Don't thank me. Just keep being worthy of it. Family's earned, not given. As midnight approached, someone suggested one last race, the entire crew running the drift course together. I'm in, Giselle said immediately. Me too, Letty added. Oh, hell yeah, Roman grinned. Time to show off my new skills. They lined up, 7 cars each representing a different member of the family. The orange RX-7, Han. The midnight blue RX-7, Giselle. Dom's Charger, imported specifically for this. Brian's Skyline. Roman's borrowed muscle car. Letty's custom build. Even Shaw in his Mercedes. Sean acted as starter, raising his arms. This one's for family, he shouted. The arms dropped. 7 cars launched forward in a symphony of engines and burning rubber. They drifted through the course not as competitors, but as one unit, a family moving together through the curves of life. Han and Giselle led, their twin RX-7s moving in perfect harmony. Dom and Letty flanked them, American muscle keeping pace with Japanese precision. Brian navigated with tactical awareness. Roman executed drifts that would have been impossible for him 6 months ago. Shaw brought up the rear, professional and precise. They completed the course together, crossing the finish line as a unified group rather than racing for position. Because that was the point. Not winning. Not competition. Together. Later, as everyone prepared to leave, Han stood with the orange RX-7 one final time. Giselle joined him, her hand finding his. You ready to go home? She asked. Yeah. But first, Han pulled out a small remote, pressed a button. The warehouse's main monitor flickered to life, displaying a map of Asia covered in pins. The Ghost Network, visualized in all its complexity. This is what I built while you were gone, Han said. Every pin is a person who reports intelligence. Every connection is a relationship built on trust. Every node is a potential ally. It's incredible. It's necessary. The world's dangerous. Threats keep emerging. But this network, our network, means we'll always see them coming. He pressed another button. The map expanded, showing connections spreading into Europe, South America, even touching North America. And it's growing, Han continued. Not because I'm forcing it, because people believe in what we're doing, protecting family, watching for threats, being ready, and the Ghost King's legacy, Giselle observed. No, Han corrected. Family's legacy. I built the structure, but every person in this room contributed. Dom taught me about loyalty, Brian about tactics, Roman about courage, Tej about technology, and you. Me? You taught me why it all matters, that survival isn't enough, that we build these networks and fight these battles not for power or revenge, but because we love people worth protecting. Giselle kissed him, soft and certain. So what happens now? Han looked at the monitor at the network spanning continents, looked at the RX-7, orange paint gleaming, looked at his family, laughing together in the warehouse. Now we live, he said. We race, we drift through Tokyo, we have barbecues in LA. We raise the next generation to understand what family means. And when threats emerge, and they will, we'll be ready. Together, always together. They walked back to join the family, leaving the monitor glowing behind them. The Ghost Network would continue operating, would continue growing, but Han Seoul-Oh was done being the Ghost King. He was just Han now. Street racer, drifter, brother, partner, family. The rain had returned to Tokyo, gentle now, washing the streets clean. The crew said their goodbyes. Dom and Letty heading back to LA, Brian and Mia to their kids, Roman and Tej to whatever adventure they'd find next. Shaw lingered, uncertain of his place even after 6 months of earned trust. You did good, Han said, extending his hand. Antarctica, the operations, all of it. Shaw took the hand, shaking firmly. I owe you my life. Owen's still in a coma, but he's alive because you didn't kill him. Could have. Would have been justified. Family doesn't kill family, Han said. And like it or not, you're family now. Earned that in Antarctica. Don't know if I deserve it. None of us do. That's what makes it family instead of a transaction. Shaw nodded, emotion flickering across his professional facade. Then he left, disappearing into Tokyo's rain. Han and Giselle stood alone in the garage, the orange and blue RX-7S side by side under the lights. You know what I realized? Giselle said. What's that? For 15 months, I was Cipher's prisoner. But in a way, you were too. Prisoner of the Ghost King identity. Prisoner of the mission. Prisoner of grief. And now, we're both free. Free to be whoever we want. Free to build whatever life makes us happy. Han smiled, pulling her close. I want to drift through Tokyo with you. Want to race in underground events? Want to have a normal, beautiful, absolutely chaotic life with family. Sounds perfect. Sounds impossible. We've done impossible before. They kissed, the rain drumming on the warehouse roof, Tokyo's neon bleeding through the windows. Somewhere in the world, threats were forming, new villains plotting, new challenges emerging. But tonight, in a warehouse in Tokyo, two people who'd conquered death and distance and impossible odds were simply alive. And that was enough. Behind them, the Ghost Network monitor glowed softly, showing a world connected by invisible threads of loyalty and trust. Sean would continue running operations. The network would continue growing. Threats would continue emerging. But Han Seoul-Oh had learned something in 15 months of being dead and 6 months of being alive. The most dangerous weapon wasn't the network or the skills or the cars. It was the choice to keep fighting, to keep loving, to keep living. For 15 months I was a ghost, Han whispered, more to himself than to Giselle. And now? She asked. Han looked at the orange RX-7, at the city beyond, at the woman beside him. Now I'm the king of this underground, but not the Ghost King. Just a king who remembers what it's like to be human, They walked to the warehouse door, rain misting their faces. Behind them, Tokyo glittered like a promise. Ahead, life waited with all its beautiful uncertainty. The Ghost King was dead. But Han Seoul-Oh had never been more alive. And sometimes, the dead don't just return. They come back stronger. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.